Chapter 610. The dark magicians who were attacking the heavenly stem saints like a tide quickly stopped and retreated, surrounding the heavenly stem saints from afar. Moreover, they gathered according to their respective attributes. After a short moment of panic, these dark magicians quickly reacted under the command of the high-level magicians. Jidong also commanded the heavenly stem saints to gather together. At the same time, he asked Lang Tianyi, "Can your pearl of thick earth still pass through the ground?" Lang Tianyi shook his head and said, "No, I just tried it. It seems that there's an extremely powerful, all-attribute magical power that has sealed the ground." Jidong's eyes flickered as he looked at the 100 rays of light in the air. "This is a defensive formation. It seems that it wants to stop us and not let us leave." Tianji said in a low voice, "Then what should we do? Should we make a move now and break through before the formation is completed? Otherwise, I'm afraid." Jidong smiled and shook his head. He said confidently, "It's okay. Let them set up the formation. If there is dark Tianji with this formation, we can indeed not escape. But after all, without dark Tianji presiding over it, no matter how strong this formation is, as long as it can't block our soul connection with the all-attribute positioning teleportation formation, it won't be able to keep us. It's better to let them think that we are trapped. If they are careless, we can also harvest more. Did you get all the crystal crowns of the dark magicians we killed just now?" Seeing that his companions nodded one after another, Jidong said in a low voice, "Since they set up the formation for us, then let's also set up the formation for them to see. The 5 elements coexistence cycle formation." As he spoke, Jidong took a step forward and stood at the forefront. Yao Qianshu and Chun Sichuan were on his left and right respectively, each pressing a hand on Jidong's shoulder. The 2 elements were about to form, but when it came to Jidong, Jidong did not use his hands to press on the shoulders of Misty Meow and Lang Tianyi. He was a dual fire saint. If he used his hands to set up the formation, how could he fight with them? Regarding this problem, Jidong had long thought of a solution. Phoenix Dance used the dragon and snake transformation, and a golden red light burst out from his body. A pair of wings stretched out from above his shoulders, swept past Chun Sichuan and Yao Qianshu's hands, and landed on Lang Tianyi's and Misty Meow's shoulders respectively, thus completing the all-attribute 5 elements coexistence cycle formation. With Jidong as the source, fire gave birth to earth, earth gave birth to metal, metal gave birth to water, water gave birth to wood, and wood gave birth to fire. The 10 elements were divided into 2 small cycles, and finally concentrated on Jidong as the source. The enormous ultimate mana of the 10 elements began to operate perfectly. At this time, all the light stem saints had more than 8 crowns in their mana. As soon as this cycle was activated, everyone could clearly feel that the mana they controlled had reached an extremely terrifying level. Just as they set up the 5 elements coexistence cycle formation, the defensive formation in the sky had also been completed. The black fog that had originally shrouded the darkness temple had completely fused with the 100 beams of light, turning into a layer of black, tin-colored light shield. On the light shield, light was flickering, and incomparably dense mana fluctuations made the darkness temple have some of the grandeur of a temple. This formation was also the main formation of the entire darkness shrine. The largest formation was called the Dark Chaos Defense Formation, and it was known as the number 1 formation in the 5 elements continent. It itself had a strong darkness attribute, and at the same time, it also had the 10 elements of chaos mana. The foundation of this formation was based on 100 huge 5 elements divine stones as the cornerstone. Every time it was activated, it would consume 10 magical beast crystallic cores of each attribute. In other words, the 100 beams of light just now were produced by extracting 100 level 10 magical beast crystallic cores. With such a terrifying combination of mana, coupled with the amplification of the formation itself, and the fusion of the 10 elements with chaos as the fundamental synthesis, the overall strength of the mana was not comparable to that of Dark Tianji. Dark Tianji had once said that the Dark Chaos Defense Formation of the Darkness Shrine required at least 10 top-notch sure-kill skills to bombard it, or an ultimate sure-kill skill to break it. Although the Heavenly Stem Saints had received an affirmative answer from Ji Dong, they could not help but feel the terrifying mana contained in this formation. In terms of the foundation of the Devil Masters, the Five Elements continent was really far from it. At this moment, the 4 saint-level soul waves that were originally scanning the darkness shrine instantly strengthened and still maintained their condensed state as they swept in the direction of Ji Dong and the others. However, the soul waves that were originally almost invisible had turned red at this time, a strange red. It was impossible for the Heavenly Stem Saints to dodge such a large-scale fan-shaped scan. Although the soul power of Ji Dong, Tianji, and Chun Sichuan had fused into one and enveloped the Heavenly Stem Saints, they could clearly feel that the consumption of their soul power had increased by 3 times in an instant. Soul-searching and soul-capturing formation, Tianji said in a deep voice. It turns out that their soul detection originated from the soul-searching and soul-capturing formation. No wonder they could maintain a saint-level scan. Ji Dong asked doubtfully, "What is the soul-searching and soul-capturing formation?" Tianji said, "The soul-searching and soul-snatching formation is an extremely powerful formation, and it can also be said to be a rather vicious soul formation. In order to complete such a formation, we first need the skeletons of 4 saint-leveled experts. Moreover, these 4 skeletons must be integrated into the formation when the saint-leveled expert had just died and his soul had yet to dissipate. The entire formation must be carved with 4 large pieces of heavenly jade in order to contain the saint-leveled souls in the skeletons with the chaotic magic power. The souls of the experts who are used as part of the formation will never be able to live again. Obviously, the Darkness Temple has already completely controlled this formation. Not only can it shield their own people, it can also be used to scan and launch a real formation attack. Once our soul power is not enough to resist the soul-searching and soul-snatching formation, whose power is comparable to the soul waves of a middle-level saint-leveled expert, our souls will be forcibly extracted from our bodies and eventually devoured by the formation. If the soul-searching and soul-snatching formation wants to continue existing, it has to devour a batch of souls every once in a while. If this soul-searching and soul-snatching formation has existed for a long time, it must have devoured a lot of souls. Darkness Tianji really deserves to be killed. Even with Tianji's relatively mild temperament, he couldn't help but be furious after discovering this soul-searching and soul-stealing formation. It was clear how much this formation angered the heavens. Ji Dong said in a low voice, "Looks like we can't stay here for too long. From now on, everyone will be under my soul-searching command. Let's go." With a loud roar, Ji Dong was the first to leap into the air. With his soul sharing, the Heavenly Stem holy disciples always knew what he wanted to do. Yao Qinshu took Tianji with him, and the 10 of them leaped into the air at the same time, charging towards the inner castle. As they moved, the dark magicians in the sky and on the ground also moved. At this time, because of the alarm, other than the few hundred dark magicians who were originally in the square, a large number of dark magicians had already rushed over. There were already more than 2,000 dark magicians in the square. In the direction of the inner castle, 8 purple figures soared into the sky. It was the 8 purple-robed high priests who were also flying in their direction. What big formation! Ji Dong sneered. At this time, the magic of the 5 elements mutual generation and circulation formation had already been completely activated, and it had become a perfect cycle. The group of dark magicians closest to them finally couldn't hold back anymore. 100 dark magicians attacked at the same time, and a dazzling golden light turned into a huge long sword in the sky, slashing straight towards the Heavenly Stem Saints. It was another multitask combination skill of the same attribute. After all, magicians weren't an army like the Annihilation Legion. These magicians had at least 4 crowns of cultivation. If there was too much magic stacking, they wouldn't be able to condense a truly threatening attack magic skill. After all, there weren't any particularly powerful magicians among them. and they couldn't control it. The stacking of 100 magicians with 4 crowns and above was already the limit of what they could achieve, and the attack power was also enough to reach the level of a primary killing skill. The 8 purple-robed high priests stopped when they were about 1,000 meters away from the heavenly stem saints, and they didn't attack them immediately. In their view, this time, the heavenly stem saints couldn't escape even if they had wings. They were surrounded by thousands of magicians, and with the multi-stacking combination skill of the same attribute, they could exhaust them to death. The 8 of them were the controllers and blockers of the battle, and they wouldn't give these heavenly stem saints a chance to escape. The red-robed high priests couldn't fly with their bodies, so they each rode their own mounts and began to command the dark demon army. The magicians of the 5 Elements continent weren't as free as those of the 5 Elements continent. They were completely under the control of the Dark Tianji, which allowed them to truly be like an army and exert their overall strength under the leadership of a leader. If the 5 Elements continent didn't have the 5 Elements mutual generation and circulation formation that Jidong knew, even if the number of magicians could catch up to the 5 Elements mutual generation and circulation formation in the 5 Elements continent, they wouldn't be able to resist at all. In the face of this golden giant sword, Jidong snorted coldly. Divine lightning shot out from his eyes, and the fire god sword in his hand slashed out. Suddenly, a dazzling red light expanded in the sky, rising to 100 meters and blasted head-on. It was the fire god slash. If it was just Jidong alone, he wouldn't easily use such a demonic attack. Even if the fire god sword had evolved, a fire god slash would still consume more than 1/3 of his own demonic power. However, he wasn't fighting alone now. With the help of the heavenly stem saints, the demonic power cycle was endless, and their demonic power could always be maintained at its peak state. With each cycle, their demonic power could increase a little. Although the output was great, the ability to sustain a battle was beyond the imagination of these dark magicians. Be it the dark magicians or the 8 purple-robe high priests, they didn't expect that Jidong would dare to use such a tyrannical demonic attack when he was surrounded by the dark demon army and the 8 supreme powerhouses. Among the 5 elements, fire subdued metal. Not to mention that it was a high-level ultimate skill against a low-level ultimate skill. There was no suspense at all. As soon as the golden giant sword in the air touched the fire god slash, it smiled like ice and snow. At the same time, above Jidong's head, the dual fire assimilation array appeared at the same time. The fire god's sword swayed in the air, and the released demonic power was actually retracted by him. At this time, Jidong had the help of his companions, and his own demonic power had expanded to a level that he couldn't even estimate. With such a powerful origin supporting the assimilation array, the effect of assimilation was far greater than if he were to use it himself. At least half of the demonic power released by the fire god slash was retracted by him. The scene that shocked the dark magicians also appeared at this moment. It didn't mean that the dark magicians who attacked them would be fine when Jidong retracted the fire god slash. In fact, on the contrary, the 100 Gung Exion attribute dark magicians spurted blood at the same time and fell to the ground one by one. Their life aura disappeared instantly. The head-on collision of energy-type demonic techniques was not fancy. It depended on whose demonic power was stronger. The low-level ultimate skill was suppressed by the high-level ultimate skill. Coupled with the terrifying power of the fire god sword, the meridians in the bodies of these 100 Gung metal attribute dark magicians had been completely shattered. The reason why Jidong used the assimilation array to retract some of the demonic power was that there was no need for the fire god slash to continue. The moment the skills of both sides collided, the battle was already over. The powerful shock caused by the connection of the demonic power was enough to kill these dark magicians who were generally less than 7 crowns. Under one blow, 100 dark magicians died, just like that. This immediately caused some chaos in the dark demon army. The high priests who led them kept giving strict orders before they barely calmed down. After a brief shock from the 8 high priests in purple robes floating in the air, the chief high priest laughed instead of being angry. He snorted coldly and said, "You've used a high-level ultimate skill right from the start. I like to see how many times you can use high-level ultimate skills. Attack from all sides. Since they have already entered a dead end, I don't believe they can still turn the sky over. With the Dark Chaos Defense Array and the Soul-Searching Array activated at the same time, it was no wonder that this High Priest had such a background. Moreover, their Dark Demon Army was rushing over from all directions. Although only the Dark Demon Army guarding the Dark Temple could use the same attribute, multiple superposition demonic techniques, it was obviously enough. Last time, the Heavenly Stem Saints killed thousands of Dark Magicians with a sudden attack. Now there were more than 8,000 Dark Magicians left. In theory, they could even release more than 80 low-level ultimate skills at the same time. The Heavenly Stem Saints were in the air and were simply the best target. In addition, there were 8 Supreme Masters holding the line. It was obvious that the Heavenly Stem Saints had no chance. Chapter 6:11. When he found out that the radiant Heavenly Stem Saints had appeared in the Darkness Shrine again, the High Priest of the Darkness Shrine had already made up his mind to keep the radiant Heavenly Stem Saints here, no matter the price. Only then could he atone for his sins. Hence, he was willing to pay the price of 100 level, 10 magical beast crystals to activate the Dark Chaos Defense Formation. He even did not hesitate to expend a large amount of soul power stored in the Soul-Searching Formation to activate it to its maximum. At this moment, there were more than 3,000 Dark Mages gathered in the Darkness Shrine, and there were more Dark Mages rushing over. With so many Dark Mages present, the entire Darkness Shrine was filled with a massive mana wave. With the High Priest Shi's command, the Dark Mages that had formed teams began to attack the radiant Heavenly Stem Saints in the sky. When Ji-Dong released the first strike of the Fire God Slash, he had already summoned the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon. There was only one reason why he had chosen to lead his partners into the sky, and that was because of the flaw of the 5-element cycle formation. There is no doubt that this formation could make use of the 10 attributes to complement each other. But there was also a flaw, and that was, it was not agile. Even though the radiant Heavenly Stems Saints could move in sync with Ji-Dong under the guidance of his soul power, it should not be forgotten that their abilities were uneven, and the speed that they could display was also the same. Once the 5-element cycle formation was completed, their speed would definitely drop to the level of the partner with the lowest cultivation level. However, it was different in the sky. Indeed, it was easy to become a target in the sky, but with the help of the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon, the only flaw of the 5-element cycle formation could be made up for. The High Priest Shi's idea was right. No matter how powerful Ji-Dong and the rest were, even with the 5-element cycle formation, it was impossible for them to kill over 8,000 Dark Mages. There were so many Dark Mages that it was enough to exhaust them to death. However, he did not know that the radiant Heavenly Stem Saints had already gathered all 10 pieces of Holy Disciple armor. With the help of the formation, their ability to continue fighting far exceeded the High Priest Shi's expectations. At least 10 primary killing techniques appeared in the sky at almost the same time. The first one was a dark vermilion bird formed from Bing Fire. Under the command of Ji-Dong, the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon moved to the side and gave up one side of the 5-element cycle formation. Water Saint Du Ming raised the Ice God Spear in his hand, and the originally glaring black light on his body turned white at this moment. The Ice God Spear pointed forward, and a cold lightning shot out from the Ice God Spear and pierced into the chest of the dark vermilion bird. Immediately, the first attack of the same attribute was shattered. Although Du Ming was not as good as Ji-Dong in terms of control of mana, he did not withdraw part of the mana from his skill. The 100 Dark Mages that attacked the dark vermilion bird immediately spat out blood, and the blood instantly turned into ice. They did not fall, but each of them turned into ice sculptures. After dealing with the first attack and killing 100 more Dark Mages, the other basic ultimate skills had already bombarded them. These basic ultimate skills had all kinds of attributes. Although each one was not enough to pose a threat to the Light Mages alone, with so many basic ultimate skills mixed together, it was not so easy to resist. Even if the Light Mages could resist, it would inevitably consume a lot of their own mana. However, Would Ji Dong and the others easily face it head-on? Fighting head-on had to be worthwhile. It was impossible to kill off the dark magic masters like before when facing so many low-level ultimate skills at the same time. The sacred evolution fire dragon's body swayed, and its thick tail suddenly shook. In an instant, its huge body suddenly became illusory, and with the light on its back, it flashed past the holy disciples. Those low-level ultimate skills immediately exploded in the air, and a large amount of chaotic mana was produced in the sky, causing the dark magic masters below to suddenly stagnate in the speed at which they were stacking their mana. Even under the suppression of the soul-searching and soul-snatching formation, Ji Dong, Tianji, and Qin Sichuan's peak saint-level soul force was not something that these ordinary devil masters could handle. The sacred evolution fire dragon's innate skill, time travel, instantly rendered these dozen or so primary killing techniques useless. The sacred evolution fire dragon swooped downwards when it used its teleportation skill. Ji Dong and the others weren't flying very high, so the sacred evolution fire dragon swooped down with all its might. In the blink of an eye, it was already 10 meters above the ground. The thick dragon tail swept out, and the sacred evolution fire dragon directly blew away more than 10 dark mages. The place where it landed was the place where a large number of dark mages had died. Under the cover of the mana turbulence in the air, Ji Dong swept his sword horizontally, and the 100-meter-long fire gods radiated red light in a fan shape. This time, he used all his strength. Not only did he break a primary killing technique that was chasing after him, but he also directly blasted towards the dark mages. The other heavenly stem saints had already jumped up the moment they helped Ji Dong complete this sword, and used their fastest speed to collect the dark crystal crown of the dead dark mages. Killing was the goal, but nurturing the battle through battle was more important. These dark mages could not have died in vain, right? The 8 purple-robed high priests floating in the sky finally could not hold back. In just a short period of time, the heavenly stem saints alone had killed nearly 500 dark mages. Although most of them were below the 7 crown rank, they still could not withstand such a killing rate. Especially Ji Dong's Fire God Slash, which was the most powerful attack output, could not be blocked by ordinary dark mages. If they continued to wait like this, even if they killed the heavenly stem saints in the end, perhaps the dark demon army would riot because of the purple-robed high priests in action. The 8 purple-robed high priests sped up at the same time and summoned their mounts. Without exception, they were all WYRMS, which were slightly different from the WYRMS of the 5 Elements continent. The WYRMS they rode on were emitting a layer of black light patterns, and their bodies seemed to be stronger than the WYRMS of the 5 Elements continent. They were obviously rank 9 WYRMS, but their bodies were similar to the rank 10 WYRMS of the 5 Elements continent. Especially High Priest Shi's mount, it was a rank 10 metal dragon, with a terrifying body length of 40 meters. When it appeared in the sky, it was like a dark cloud. Not only did they move, but all the red-robe high priests also moved at the same time. After nearly 10 died and more than 10 were seriously injured, the total number of red-robe high priests was about 30. This was already the full strength of the Darkness Temple. High Priest, she was able to gain Darkness Tianji's trust and preside over the Darkness Temple when Darkness Tianji was not around. It was definitely not because of his cultivation. Seeing that the Light Radiant's holy disciples were still able to kill a large number of them, he instantly changed his tactics. He ordered the low-level dark magicians to condense multiple demonic skills of the same attribute and retreat to the periphery, preventing the Light Radiant's holy disciples from breaking out of the encirclement. The main attack was changed to the 8 of them and all the red-robed high priests. Even so, the chief high priest was still very depressed, because 2 of their original 10 purple-robed high priests had died. If the 2 earth high priests whose cultivation was second only to his were still around, he was confident that they could subdue the Light Radiant's holy disciples with their full elemental power. However, now that 2 of them were gone, the situation was obviously worse. Ji Dong did not seem to notice the changes in the Dark Demon Army at all. Riding on the back of the sacred evolution fire dragon, his gaze fell on the 4 century towers in the inner castle of the Darkness Temple that were jointly releasing the soul-searching formation, while the other heavenly stem holy disciples were still collecting the dark crystal crown quickly. Guang Tianji's words reminded Ji Dong that the foundation of the soul-searching formation was 4 large pieces of jade of heaven. If the dark chaos defense formation was the foundation of the entire Darkness Temple, then the soul-searching formation could be said to be the soul formation of the Darkness Temple. The dark chaos defense formation was so powerful that it had to pay a huge price to use it once. In comparison, the soul-searching formation was much more powerful than the dark chaos defense formation. Compared to the dark chaos defense formation, the soul-searching formation was much more useful. Destroying it would be a greater blow to the Darkness Temple than taking away the 2 divine weapons in the previous operation. After all, the 2 water divine weapons could not be used by the Dark Demon Masters. Guang Tianji only kept them to restrict the Light Radiance holy disciples. More importantly, if he could obtain the 4 pieces of Jade of Heaven, how much would the Sword of the Fire God improve? Looking coldly at the approaching Dark Demon Masters, Ji Dong sent a signal to his companions. The heavenly stem holy disciples immediately returned to the sacred evolution fire dragon. The sacred evolution fire dragon's 9 claws stepped on the ground and immediately rose into the air. At this moment, the light holy disciples were all delighted. Even the cold Ajin had a look of satisfaction in his eyes. They had retrieved hundreds of darkness crystal crowns just now. Although there were no 7 or 8 crowns among them, there were many of them. They had only been in the 5 elements continent for more than 10 days, but their cultivation had improved faster than it had in the past few months. How could they not be excited? The 50,000 regular devil army under Guang Tianji, and even the 100,000 reserve devil army, would become their prey. No matter how powerful Guang Tianji was, he was only one. Ever since the Light Radiance holy disciples entered the 5 elements continent, they were like tigers in a flock of sheep. Under the lead of the 8 purple-robed high priests, the powerhouses of the Darkness Temple formed a semicircle in the air. They had already released their yin-yang crowns, which shone brightly above their heads. Among them, 2 purple-robed high priests stared at the sacred evolution fire dragon attentively. Although the sacred evolution fire dragon had not displayed much combat power so far, its transmigration skill was enough to give these purple-robed high priests a headache. It had used the transmigration skill twice. The first time was in the inner castle, where it had brought Ji Dong, Chun Xishuan, and Yao Qianshu out of the encirclement and successfully arrived at an excellent position to block the dark magic masters, thus laying a solid foundation for victory. The second time was when more than a dozen primary killing skills bombarded them. If it were not for the powerful sacred evolution fire dragon, the Light Radiance holy disciples would have to face the bombardment of many primary killing skills. Even if they had enough strength to resist it, it would definitely consume a lot of their mana. However, these dark magic masters could be said to be the elites of the Darkness Temple. Their actual combat ability and skills were better than those of the same level in the 5 elements continent. After careful observation, they also discovered that although the transmigration skill of the sacred evolution fire dragon could ignore lock-on, it also had its own shortcomings, and that was the distance. The transmigration skill could travel between 100 to 150 meters. After all, if such an overbearing skill had no restrictions, it would simply be a divine skill. How could it exist in a magical beast? Therefore, at this time, in order to guard against the sacred evolution fire dragon's transmigration, the 8 purple-robed high priests did not stand in a row, but floated in the air in layers. The same was true for the red-robed high priests who moved with them. With their current position, if the sacred evolution fire dragon used the transmigration skill from the front, it would only walk right into their trap and directly rush into their encirclement. The saints were not fools. Of course, they would not do such a thing. Under the command of the high priests, these top dark magic masters were very serious at this time. They did not think that they could defeat the saints in one fell swoop with their own strength. Reality had proven that even the top-notch ultimate skill could not kill them in one fell swoop. What they wanted to do was to rely on their superior numbers and experts to exhaust the mana of the saints. No matter how powerful a magic master was, once his mana was exhausted, he could only be slaughtered. Therefore, these dark magic masters were not in a hurry to make a move at all. The soul-searching and soul-capturing formation was still open. They were very clear that even if there were magic masters who had surpassed the saint level on the saint side to resist the soul-searching and soul-capturing formation, their own soul power would continue to be depleted. With such a good opportunity to exhaust their soul power, why would they be in a hurry to make a move? 2 5-elemental boundaries opened on both sides of the high priests. They were completely set up by the 8-crowned red-robed high priests. Although Jidong's fire god slash was domineering, the purple-robed high priest obviously would not let him use the fire god slash to hit the 5 elemental boundaries. The 5 elemental mutual generation and circulation formation was set up the moment the saints returned to the back of the sacred evolution fire dragon. Chapter 6:12. In the eyes of these dark and mysterious top-notch wizards, the saints would definitely try their best to break out of the encirclement of the darkness and chaos defense formation, the suppression of the soul-searching formation, and the encirclement of so many high-level wizards. However, something completely out of their expectations happened at this moment. Jidong had no intention of breaking out of the encirclement with the holy disciples. When everyone formed the 5 elements coexistence formation on the back of the sacred flame dragon, he raised the fire god sword in his hand, and massive mana circulated at an unparalleled speed. Jidong's body emitted a golden red luster that shot into the sky, as though a sun had suddenly appeared in this world dominated by darkness. The ultimate dual fire mana on Jidong's body was already rather domineering, and now, with the continuous enhancement of his partner's mana circulation, the faces of the purple-robed high priest changed, because they could clearly feel that Jidong's mana was increasing at a speed that exceeded their expectations. In just a few breaths, even the level 98 high priest mana seemed to have surpassed him. What is he doing? Is he crazy? He actually wants to absorb his partner's mana to release such a powerful ultimate skill in front of so many of us. Without a doubt, this is a suicidal act. The Dark Demon Masters did not know about the existence of a strange formation like the 5 elements, mutual generation, and circulation formation. Therefore, in their opinion, the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples were only using the mutual demonic power to strengthen Jidong. With Jidong's less than 9 crowns of demonic power, he was about to unleash a top-notch killing technique that could only be used by Saint-tier cultivators. Without a doubt, after this attack, the demonic power of the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples would be completely drained. This was the situation that the Dark Demon Masters wanted to see the most. The reason why the High Priest did not order the purple-robed High Priest to attack at the first instance was mainly because he was afraid of Jidong's unknown refraction ability. It was simply unimaginable for them to be able to refract a top-notch ultimate skill. Hence, they did not release powerful skills at the first instance, lest they were used by Jidong again. However, at this moment, Jidong actually activated all his mana and did not have the slightest intention of escaping. It seemed like he wanted to fight them head-on. How could the Dark Magicians not be overjoyed? Your Radiant Sky, Ganyu disciples are powerful, but we also have 8 people with ultimate demonic energy. 8 supreme beings. Competing in total demonic energy? Mutual birth demonic skill? Why would these purple-robed high priests be afraid? Full defense. The chief high priest gave the order. Having learned his lesson from last time, and now that they had the absolute advantage, the chief high priest had decided not to give Jidong any chance to kill the saints. What if Jidong's skill was just an illusion, and he was actually trying to reflect their ultimate skill? They might as well choose to defend. Even if the saints really launched an attack, it was unlikely to cause too much damage to them. If it was an illusion, then there was no need to mention it. Now, the last thing they were afraid of was wasting time. The soul-searching and soul-capturing array was not just for show. The chief high priest had always believed that even if there was a saint-level soul among the saints, it would not be too strong. It would not take long for the soul-searching and soul-capturing array to deplete it. At that time, they would really be at the mercy of the saints. Hence, he gave the safest order, which was to defend and not attack. To become the chief high priest, one did not rely on demonic energy alone. In terms of commanding, he had to be far better than the other purple-robed high priests. Only then would he be valued by dark secrets. What was Ji Dong trying to do? Not only did the purple-robed high priests not understand, but the saints of heavenly secrets also did not understand. They were all smart people, and at this time, they were under immense pressure from almost all the darkness magicians in the darkness shrine, as well as the two large-scale arrays. In such a disadvantageous situation, it was obviously extremely unwise for Ji Dong to launch an all-out attack. What confused the saints of heavenly secrets the most was that Ji Dong did not explain to them this time. Instead, he focused all his attention on the fire god sword in his hand. His expression was solemn and cold. Before he started, he simply said to his companions, "Trust me." The reason why Ji Dong didn't tell his partners about his plan was simple. As long as he wasn't discovered by the other party, he wouldn't be in any danger at all. If he succeeded, it would definitely be a huge blow to the darkness shrine. Even if he failed, they would still be able to escape unscathed. Hence, he definitely couldn't let those purple-robed high priests see any clues from the expressions of the heavenly stem saints. It would be best to let them see the anxious expressions of his companions. The red light on the fire god's sword became more and more intense, and a shocking rainbow spewed out. It faintly made contact with the dark chaos defense formation in the sky, causing glaring sparks and strong mana waves to bloom continuously. The purple-robed high priests secretly sneered in their hearts. They were most at ease with the dark chaos defense formation in the sky. Not to mention the saints in front of them. Even their darkness divination could not break out of the formation by force. The chief high priest even thought that it would be best if Ji Dong and the rest attacked the formation in the sky, and the 100-level 10 magical beast essence crystals would not be wasted. However, even if the purple-robed high priest judged that the situation was absolutely advantageous to them, the light released by the fire god's sword still made them feel a little terrified. They could also cast a top-notch sure-kill skill with the help of each other, but it was definitely not as domineering as the fire god sword in Ji Dong's hand. The fire god sword could no longer be seen, and even Ji Dong's hands could no longer be seen. There was only the huge red light pillar that soared into the sky. If it was not for the suppression of the dark chaos defense formation, who knew how high the red light could rise? The purest fire attribute mana was the most powerful top-notch sure-kill skill these purple-robed high priests had ever seen. They could even be sure that even if darkness divination was here, he would not be able to defeat Ji Dong in a single hit. He would only be able to consume his mana. The bodies of the 8 purple-robed high priests had already gathered together. Although the 2 Earth Supremes were gone, the 8 of them were still able to complete a reverse generation. The 8 purple-robed high priests worked together and concentrated all their mana on the 2 fire gods high priests through metal to water, water to wood, and wood to fire. They then released a top-notch defensive demonic skill. This time, there were a total of 8 purple-robed high priests. Once this top-notch defensive demonic skill was released, not only did it protect them, but also protected all the red-robed high priests. Moreover, the Fire Divine Sword's attack was of the fire attribute, and their defensive demonic skills were also of the fire attribute. With the same attribute, it would be easier to resist. Therefore, they were completely confident that they could block Ji Dong's attack. Even if Ji Dong injured them with a divine weapon, the attack would be evenly distributed among each of them. It was not a big deal for them to suffer some injuries. Compared to their opponents who had their mana drained, they clearly had the upper hand. The red-robed high priests did not dare to stay idle. They also released their best defensive demonic skills, hoping that they could reduce the impact of Ji Dong's attack. The purple-robe high priests were not afraid that Ji Dong would move again. After releasing such a powerful sure-kill skill, How could he move when he was bearing such a terrifying amount of mana? Even his magical beast transmigration skill could not be used, because that magical beast was also pouring all its mana into Ji Dong's body. Everyone was waiting for the arrival of this earth-shattering attack. On the ground, the low-level dark mages retreated far away, lest they be affected by the turbulence caused by the collision of mana. With the support of the 5-element cycle formation, Ji Dong's mana had been raised to the limit that his body could support. In theory, as long as one was a Saint rank powerhouse, they could use a low-level sure kill skill at will. However, to use a top-level sure kill skill at will, one had to be at the peak of the Saint rank. However, Saint rank powerhouses were already able to withstand the mana pressure when using a top-level sure kill skill. Last time, the reason why Ji Dong was able to kill the 2 Earth Element Purple Robe High Priests so easily was because the 2 Earth Element Purple Robed High Priests had joined hands to cast a top-level sure kill skill, but their bodies still could not bear it. They had suffered serious injuries, and their mana had been drained, so they were killed by Ji Dong. On the surface, Ji Dong's cultivation seemed to be only at the 8-crown level. The dark mages in front of him naturally judged that even if he was talented, he would not feel good withstanding such a huge amount of mana. Hence, they hoped that Ji Dong would use this attack. However, they did not know that not only had Ji Dong's soul cultivation reached the mid-level of the Saint rank, but his body was also at the Saint rank. His body would not be injured at all when bearing such a huge amount of mana. A strange smile appeared at the corner of Ji Dong's mouth. At the same time, a red light shot out from his wrist. That's right, Ji Dong could not do anything else. Even the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples could not do anything else because they had to support Ji Dong's top-level sure kill skill with all their might. However, this did not affect him from using his soul power to command people other than the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples. A red light flashed, and the Eclipse Phoenix Hua floated out of the Vermilion Bird Bracelet. It trembled when it felt the huge amount of mana on the Fire Divine Sword, but this did not affect its movements. There was a scroll in Hua Er's mouth. The scroll fell and landed in the hands of Tianji, who was in the center of the 5-element cycle formation. At the same time, Hua also floated down and landed on the back of the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon. Even without Ji Dong's instructions, Fekta knew what to do when he received the scroll. The first thing he did was to open this scroll, which was branded with some unknown skill. An intense white light suddenly appeared and enveloped the entire Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and the people on its back. A piercing silver light shot out from Ji Dong's eyes. The combined saint-leveled soul power of the 3 of them was unleashed to the extreme at this moment. The illusory silver light completely ignored the top-level sure kill skill that the Dark Demonic Masters had set up in front of them. It passed through them and only stopped in front of the castle. Soul power and mana were 2 different forms of energy. Soul cultivation at the pinnacle of the saint level was on the same level as a top-level sure kill skill. Hence, the purple-robed great Buddhist priest could not stop Ji Dong's actions at all. Oh no, the chief high priest's expression changed. He only just realized that the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples could use their soul power at the pinnacle of the saint level. However, it was too late for him to realize this now. Ji Dong had already accomplished what he wanted to do. The dense white light on the scroll that Tianji had unfurled was already covered with a layer of faint silver light as the soul light in Ji Dong's eyes shot out. An unbelievable scene ensued. With a flash of light, the Fire God Sword's top-level sure kill skill disappeared on the spot, along with the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples. However, they only disappeared for a moment. In the next moment, they appeared in the sky above the Darkness Temple again. However, they did not appear where they had been previously. Instead, they appeared behind the purple-robed and red-robed great Buddhist priests and in the sky in front of the inner castle. After accumulating mana for such a long time, Ji Dong finally slashed out with his sword. The moment the bewitching red light slashed out, an illusory figure appeared behind the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon. This faint red figure was completely transparent, But the terrifying pressure it released caused all the evil masters in the Darkness Temple to freeze. Even the soul wave released by the soul-searching and soul-capturing formation was instantly dispersed. Even the powerful darkness and chaos defense formation in the sky shook, and layers of halos fluctuated violently. Even though it was not attacked, the mana it contained was reduced by half. Fortunately, the huge red figure only existed for a moment. In the next moment, it had already fused with Ji-Dong's body. The golden red light on Ji-Dong's body suddenly turned into the same red color as the fire god sword. At that moment, the red light in his hand slashed out horizontally. The fire god slash. This was the true fire god slash. The huge red figure that appeared at that moment was the true power of the fire god sword. It was similar to the Azura's possession that the killing god Shupnus had used to deal with the flaming bar. The moment that red light appeared, it was also the instant when all non-god level attacks became immune. Chapter 613. The instant that illusory red figure appeared, it was also the instant that all non-god tier attacks became immune. It was this sudden wave of god tier aura that caused the dark chaos defense formation in the sky to react so strongly. The fire god sword was actually able to produce a wave of god tier aura for a brief moment when it used its ultimate skill. This was something that even Ji-Dong did not expect. At the same time, Ji-Dong could no longer sense Shupnus aura. This was the absolute suppression of a superior god against a lesser god. The purple-robed high priests, who had been waiting in the air and prepared to receive the attack, suddenly realized that something was wrong. When they dispersed their mana and turned around, they saw this scene. Logically speaking, when Ji-Dong and the others suddenly changed their positions and appeared in front of the Darkness Shrine's inner castle and aimed their attacks at the inner castle, they should have been shocked and regretful. However, at this moment, not a single purple-robed or red-robed high priest felt that way. There was only one emotion that appeared in their hearts: lingering fear. That's right, lingering fear. The instant that terrifying red light attacked, it actually produced a power that they could not understand at all. Their previous confidence was completely gone. Only the heavens knew what would have happened if that sword had really slashed at them. They were certain that with their previous defenses, they would not have been able to completely block the power of that sword. The two purple-robed high priests, in particular, were drenched in sweat. As the ones who were responsible for releasing the defensive skill, they were bound to suffer the most damage. Without a doubt, if the sword were to slash at them, the other purple-robe high priests might not be able to survive, but the two of them would definitely die. Fortunately, the shocking red light only appeared for a moment before it disappeared. The suffocating aura also dissipated. At the same time, the soul suppression of the soul-searching and soul-capturing formation disappeared. The inner castle, which had been plagued with disasters for the past 10 days, once again suffered a strong blow. The four tallest sentry towers in the inner castle, which were also the four sentry towers that released the soul-searching and soul-capturing formation, were destroyed at the same time. The defensive formations that were placed on them instantly collapsed under the sweep of the red light. Even the top of the tower that had just been repaired was sliced off a large piece. Even with so many defensive formations in the inner castle, it could not stop the explosion of this attack at all. 5 elements, yin-yang world, collective teleportation. Ji-Dong let out a loud shout and broke off the 5 elements mutual generation and circulation array. He rushed out, and the Eclipse Phoenix Hua took his place. She released her ultimate dual flames and immediately formed the 5 elements yin-yang world with the Heavenly Stem Saint's ultimate devil energy. No one dared to hesitate. The 10 elemental teleportation formations appeared above the sacred evolution fire dragon at the same time. The entire teleportation process took 10 seconds. 10 seconds might seem like a very short time, but in the current battlefield, it was rather long. The moment Ji-Dong's figure appeared, the Vulcan sword in his hand, which had returned to its original length of 4 feet, stabbed out. Losing the support of a large amount of mana did not affect Ji-Dong from releasing its original form. The 4 feet long sword instantly became 9 meters long, and it ruthlessly stabbed into the sentry tower closest to Ji-Dong that had lost its roof. The light disappeared in a flash, and the Vulcan sword that had dimmed suddenly lit up. Although the replenishment of a large piece of heavenly jade could not restore its mana, a sufficient amount of chaos could be converted into chaos flames, which could greatly promote its evolution. This was also the true purpose of Ji Dong's series of actions. The Flying Snake Flash played a key role at this time. For the Dark Magicians, they only had 10 seconds to attack, but for Ji Dong, he only had 10 seconds. He had to complete the fusion of the 4 pieces of Heaven Jade before his partners teleported away. The Dark Magicians finally reacted. The Chief High Priest roared angrily and urged his magical beast mount to rush over. They were almost 2,000 meters away from the inner castle. As their mounts flew, they also activated their magic power and released their magic skills. However, just as Ji Dong had predicted, after releasing a top-notch defensive magic skill, it was impossible for these purple-robe high priests to release such a top-notch sure-kill magic skill. Although the defensive magic skill dissipated in the end, they did not know the 5 elements assimilation spell formation, so they could not take back the mana that they released. The mana of the 2 fire purple-robe high priests was immediately depleted, and they did not dare to approach at all for fear of being killed by Ji Dong and the others. At this time, they naturally understood that they had been tricked by Ji Dong. At the last moment, the scroll that Ji Dong had asked the Eclipse Phoenix to pass to Tianji was undoubtedly an extremely rare short-distance teleportation scroll. In terms of value, this short-distance teleportation scroll was much worse than the long-distance directional teleportation scroll that Ji Dong had used previously. However, its practicality was not bad at all. Of course, in order to make this short-distance teleportation scroll work in that situation just now, they still needed the combined soul power of Ji Dong and the others at the peak of the saint level to guide them. Otherwise, they could only stay where they were. Even if they understood everything now, it was too late. Although they still didn't think that the saints had the ability to escape, the fact that the soul-searching and soul-capturing array had been destroyed was not only a great humiliation, but was also something that the dark heavenly secrets would never forgive. Just as Ji Dong and Light Tianji had predicted previously, although the dark chaos defensive spell formation was important to the darkness shrine, it was also very costly. Hence, it was not very practical. The soul-searching and soul-seizing spell formation was the soul and core of the entire darkness shrine. With it, as long as it was used properly, it could be discovered immediately regardless of whether enemies or spies had infiltrated. Moreover, the suppression of the saint-level soul was not something that ordinary mages could withstand. The destruction of the spell formation would definitely be a huge blow to the darkness shrine. Moreover, the inner castle of the darkness shrine was the core of the darkness shrine. It was already a great humiliation that a hole had been created in it previously, but this time, even the top had been flattened. If Dark Tianji were to return and see this scene, he would definitely go crazy. Even the purple-robed high priests in front of them found it hard to accept. Seeing Ji Dong continuously stabbing the fire god sword into one sentry tower after another, in the eyes of the Dark Devil Master, he wanted to completely destroy the soul-searching and soul-seizing array and the foundation of the soul-searching and soul-seizing array. All of the Dark Devil Master only had one thought, and that was to tear Ji Dong into 10,000 pieces. Only then could they resolve the hatred in their hearts. Hence, when all the dark mages launched their attacks, their first target was not the heavenly stem saints on the back of the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon, but Ji Dong, who was moving between the towers. This was exactly what Ji Dong wanted to see the most. He wanted to focus all the pressure on himself so that his partners would have enough time to activate the teleportation portal. By the time the first demonic skill appeared in front of Ji Dong, 6 seconds had passed. At this time, Ji Dong's Fire Divine Sword had just been pulled out from the third tower. Even without the help of the heavenly secrets, Ji Dong knew that he had made a huge profit this time. The Fire Divine Sword would definitely be able to evolve greatly. With the 3 swords inserted, he discovered through his soul detection that the cornerstone of the soul-searching and soul-seizing spell formation was at least a square meter of Heaven Jade. Although there was a difference in quality from the small piece of heaven jade that he had obtained before, it won in size. After absorbing 3 pieces of heaven jade, the fire divine sword rippled with a layer of autumn water-like luster, and the originally bewitching red became more transparent. With a wave of the fire divine sword, Jidong's body had already leaped out like lightning, and the first demonic skill that arrived was easily neutralized by the fire divine sword. Although he had used the power of the fire divine sword, the 5-element cycle formation did not drain Jidong's mana. Moreover, although his mana was not at its peak, it was about 80% of its peak. Don't forget that he also had a unique preservation formation. The preservation formation in his yin-yang crown could store twice the mana of the other saints. The other saints only had 30% to 40% of their mana left, but Jidong still had 80% after replenishing it. This was because Jidong had misjudged the mana consumption of the Fire Divine Slash in the state of the Super Ultimate skill. The Fire Divine Sword was inserted into the 4th tower. At this time, the attacks of the Purple Robe High Priest were already concentrated, and the Red Robe High Priest followed closely behind. It would only take at most 2 seconds for their attacks to land on Jidong. 8 seconds had passed, and Jidong only had 2 seconds left. Jidong, come back quickly! Chun Sichuan shouted anxiously. The teleportation formation had been activated, and Jidong had to return to where they were within 2 seconds before they could teleport away together. If he did not return in time, it would be troublesome. Facing so many dark magicians at the same time, he would not have the time to use the teleportation formation to leave alone. As Chun Sichuan shouted, 3 bottles of jade of the Earth Magic Skill wine were thrown out from Jidong's hands. 27 fire dragons appeared out of thin air and sealed the space in front of Jidong. It could not be said that it completely blocked the attacks of the Purple Robe High Priests and Red Robe High Priests, but there was one thing that was certain, and that was to trigger this round of attacks. The effect of the magic skill wine was almost the same as the scroll. The biggest advantage of using them was that the released magic skill had nothing to do with the caster. In other words, no matter how much the 27 fire dragons were destroyed, because they were not connected to Jidong's mana, they would not affect Jidong. 2 seconds to block the wave of attacks from the Dark Magicians was enough time for Jidong. He had now absorbed the 4th piece of Jade of Heaven in the soul-searching and soul-capturing formation. Although there was only 1 second left, with his speed, he could easily use the Flying Snake Flash to return to the back of the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and leave with his companions. However, just as Jidong released the 3 bottles of mana skills to block the enemies, he subconsciously glanced at the highest point of the inner castle that had been flattened. That was their destination the last time they were here, the dark, forbidden room of the secrets of heaven. With a single glance, he saw that there were 2 large leather bags in the repaired forbidden room, and there were rich mana waves in them. A thought flashed in his mind, and he already knew what they were. The Saints did not expect Jidong to make such a shocking decision at this time. You guys go first. Jidong's voice sounded in the minds of his companions. He turned around and flew away. He did not return to the back of the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon, but instead pounced in the direction of the forbidden room like a bolt of lightning. Boom, 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 boom. Violent explosions sounded continuously in the air. The 27 golden dragons and the many powerful magic skills collided violently in the air, and the terrifying mana waves caused the sky above the Darkness Temple to be completely chaotic. The air currents in the forest exploded, and the mana of the 10 elements became extremely violent like a volcanic eruption. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's body flashed, and the teleportation portal was completed. It had already disappeared with the group, and the destination was naturally the location of the all-attribute teleportation portal that they had left 500 miles away from the Darkness Temple. At the same time, Jidong also sneaked into the forbidden room of the inner castle. Due to the strong light produced by the explosions of the many magic skills, no dark magician saw Jidong's movements. They could only see the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon disappear into thin air. The purple-robed high priests all stopped. Their mounts did not dare to go near the mana turbulence produced by the collision of more than 10 ultimate skills. How is this possible? The chief high priest lifted his head to look at the dark chaos defense formation in the sky. He couldn't believe that there were people who could teleport out of the dark chaos defense formation, not even with a teleportation scroll. However, he quickly realized his mistake. Since those people could teleport for a short distance while executing their ultimate skills, what else couldn't they teleport to? At this thought, the chief high priest's face turned pale. The darkness priests looked at each other, and they saw the helplessness and fear on each other's faces. If they had hoped that Darkness Tianji would return a little later, they now hoped that he would return as soon as possible. Such an enemy was not something they could contend with at all. Chapter 614. He could escape through teleportation at any time and launch a lightning war against the Darkness Shrine at any time. Such an opponent could only be described as terrifying. There were 8 purple-robed high priests and 8 supreme masters, but they hadn't even touched the person's body from the beginning to the end. They had sacrificed hundreds of Devil Masters' lives, and even the soul-searching and soul-capturing formation had been destroyed. If they came again, how could the Darkness Temple discover them the moment they appeared? The mana turbulence in the air gradually dissipated. Just as the purple-robe high priests were feeling sorrowful about the power of the heavenly gone saints, a special mana wave suddenly attracted their attention. When they looked over, they saw a special ray of light flashing past the forbidden room in the center of the Darkness Inner Castle. Immediately after, all the auras disappeared. What's going on? The chief high priest hurriedly urged the metal dragon to soar into the sky. When he arrived at the top of the Darkness Inner Castle, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. The items that were left in the forbidden room previously, including the 2 large leather bags that had just been placed in it, were gone. The entire forbidden room was so clean that only some dust was left. He actually didn't leave just now. The chief high priest couldn't believe it at all. Just like how the heavenly gone saints believed that Ji Dong would be able to catch up with the teleportation at the last moment, the purple robe high priests also determined that Ji Dong must have left with the WYRM when they discovered the teleportation. However, at this moment, a completely different scene was presented in front of them. If Ji Dong had left just now, who had ransacked this place? Wasn't that the mana wave just now also the aura wave of teleportation? Yes, what they felt was the mana wave left behind by Ji Dong when he left. Ji Dong didn't dare to teleport away with his companions because he was not impulsive. The collision of so many ultimate skills would cause turbulence in the air to give him a certain amount of time. Hence, after he entered the Forbidden Room, he immediately stored everything in the Forbidden Room into the Vermilion Bird Bracelet and waited for the mana turbulence outside to weaken before activating the teleportation array with all his might. Only then did he activate the teleportation array with all his might. Even if there was a dark, primal chaos defensive array blocking the outside, with his saint-level soul cultivation, it wouldn't be a problem for him to break through the defensive array before him. If it wasn't for the fact that the divine power released by the Fire Divine Sword weakened the power of the Great Dark Chaos Defense Formation by half, Ji Dong wouldn't have dared to do this. At the very least, he would have considered it. After all, if he stayed here alone and was discovered by the Dark Demon Masters, he would be surrounded and killed. However, the Great Dark Chaos Defense Formation itself had been greatly weakened and couldn't stop his Saint Stage soul cultivation from connecting with the teleportation formation he had set up previously. What else did he have to fear? While the purple-robed high priests were in a daze, his teleportation had already been completed. He floated away in a dignified manner. Only then could the robbery be considered complete. 500 miles away from the Divine Temple of Darkness. With a flash of light, the sacred evolution fire dragon appeared out of thin air. It had just landed on the ground when Mao Tai and Wu Yangye roared at the same time, releasing uneasy sounds. It was not just them. The Eclipse Phoenix Hua also spread her wings and soared into the sky. She circled around the sacred evolution fire dragon in the sky and also let out anxious cries. The heavenly stem divine disciples came down from the back of the sacred evolution fire dragon. This time, Chen Xishuan was really anxious. Her beautiful face was deathly pale, as she clenched her fists tightly as she looked in the direction of the divine temple of darkness. She took out Xidong from her storage device and said gently, "Be good, Xidong. Wait for me here." After saying that, she turned around and leaped up, ready to rush in the direction of the divine temple of darkness. Xixian calmed down. Ajin was the fastest. At this moment, only her speed could stop Chen Xishuan. In a flash, she had already appeared in front of Chen Xishuan and hugged her. "Let go of me," Chen Xishuan said coldly. A scene that shocked the other heavenly stem saints appeared. Usually, in their eyes, Chen Xishuan was always so gentle, and among the female sorcerers of the Saints of Light, there was no doubt that Ajin was the most domineering and the most powerful one. However, at this moment, after Chen Xishuan shouted coldly, Ajin actually let go of her slowly. There was even a hint of fear in her eyes. The holy disciples of light could not help but be puzzled. In their eyes, it should be the other way around. Chen Xishuan retracted the cold light in her eyes. Just as she was about to soar into the sky, she heard Ajin say, "Since you insist on going, I'll go with you." Chen Xishuan was stunned for a moment. She looked at her meaningfully and shook her head. "You don't have to go," Ajin said. "Haven't you always trusted him? Why did you?" Chen Xishuan said angrily, "I do trust him, but he is currently surrounded. There are 8 Supreme Being experts on the other side. How can I not be anxious? Don't you like him too? Why aren't you anxious?" Ajin's thoughts were exposed by Chen Xishuan in front of the heavenly stem holy disciples. She was instantly stunned. Chen Xishuan also realized that she had said something wrong. She said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Ajin. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I can't live without Ji Dong. Even if I die, I want to die with him." Old foxes like Tianji, Yao, Qianshu, and Lang Tianyi had long realized that Ajin liked Ji Dong. Miao Miao could also see some clues. However, Du Ming, Du Exin, and Lon Bauer were greatly shocked, especially Lon Bauer. She thought that she had already buried that feeling in her heart because she knew that she had no chance at all. Until now, Ji Dong was still unwilling to be with such a perfect Chen Xishuan. How could he accept her feelings? Only now did she realize that she was not the only one who had buried her feelings in her heart. Ajin was the same. Moreover, they both liked the same person. Hearing Chen Xishuan's words, Ajin's face turned a little pale. Finally, he took a deep breath and looked at Chen Xishuan bravely. He said something that only the two of them could understand. "I just want to stay by your side forever." Tears welled up in Chen Xishuan's eyes. She opened her arms and hugged Ajin. She said, I'm sorry. In the next moment, Ajin suddenly let out a muffled groan. The other holy disciples were shocked to see that Chen Xishuan had actually raised her palm like a knife and slashed it at Ajin's neck. Even though Ajin had a saint-level physique, under Chen Xishuan's attack, he slowly fell into her arms. Chen Xishuan murmured, "I'm sorry, Ajin. I know I'm very selfish, but even if I have to die with him, I can only be alone." As she spoke, she had already floated up with Ajin in her arms. She handed Ajin's tears to Miao Miao and turned to leave. "Wait a minute!" Tianji suddenly shouted. Chen Xishuan's body froze, but she did not turn around. Instead, she continued to fly away. However, Tianji's next words forced her to stop. Ji Dong is back. It should be Ji Dong who is back. Chen Xishuan suddenly turned around, and her eyes were fixed on the teleportation portal. Indeed, a multicolored light surged, and the golden-red light suddenly brightened. The air twisted slightly, and in the next moment, Ji Dong had already appeared in front of everyone out of thin air. Haha, I've really struck it rich this time. As soon as Ji Dong appeared, he immediately laughed wildly. It was the first time the holy disciples of the Light Sect had seen him so excited. However, seeing how he was laughing, everyone remained silent. They all looked at him strangely. Of course, Ji Dong did not know what had happened before he returned. After laughing wildly for a while, he suddenly realized that no one was responding to him. The atmosphere was also a little strange. Only then did his smile disappear. He looked around at everyone, and when he saw their gazes, he could not help but be stunned. Why are you all looking at me like that? However, he quickly came to a realization. All right, it's my fault. I didn't have time to communicate with you all. However, I was not in any danger at that time. With the collision turbulence of the ultimate technique, they did not even realize that I had snuck into the inner castle. Moreover, I had many demonic technique wines made from jade of the earth with me. It was enough to last me until I teleported back. It was fine even if I was discovered. Hearing Jidong's words, Chun Sichuan suddenly let out a cry, turned around, and ran away. Her tears flowed uncontrollably, and all Jidong could see was the sparkling water droplets floating in the air. What's wrong with Sichuan? Meow meow. Why is Ajin unconscious in your arms? She should not be injured, Jidong asked in confusion as he looked at the crowd. Chun Sichuan's weeping departure had unconsciously tugged at his heart. Meow Meow said unhappily, "It's a good thing that you came back in time. If you had come back a little later, I'm afraid that you would have had to play the role of a martyr, and two at that. You should have gone after Sichuan as soon as possible. I really don't understand. Sichuan is so good and is willing to give up everything for you. Why would you, a cold-hearted fellow, refuse to accept her no matter what she says?" That's right. Sister Meow Meow is right. Teacher, you really should treat Sister Sichuan better. Du Xiner was the one who spoke. As she spoke, she nodded in agreement. Jidong looked in the direction that Chun Sichuan had left in. At that moment, he could no longer see her figure. He sighed inwardly and casually threw 2 large leather bags in front of the crowd. Only then did he rise up and chase after Chun Sichuan. What's this? Yao Qianshu was most interested in treasures. When he saw the 2 leather bags that Jidong had thrown on the ground, he immediately ran over excitedly and opened them without any hesitation. The moment he opened the leather bag, a surge of magic surged out. The impact caused Yao Qianshu, who was squatting down, to fall to the ground. The gazes of the heavenly stem holy disciples were also attracted. Apart from Ah Jin, who had fainted, everyone made the same action at almost the same time. They sucked in a breath of cold air. The bag was actually filled to the brim with dark crystal crowns. The bright light dazzled everyone's eyes. Heavens, how many dark magicians must have died to have so many crystal crowns? Look, there seems to be an 8-crown magicians among them. Kinji muttered, I know. The reason why Jidong wasn't willing to return with us just now is probably because he discovered the existence of these 2 bags of crystal crowns. He risked his life for us. These should have been dropped by the dark magicians we killed last time. When Jidong had suddenly turned around and pounced towards the forbidden room, the heavenly stem holy disciples almost all thought that he had discovered the heaven jade in the forbidden room and was willing to take the risk. But now, they realized that they were completely wrong. Jidong didn't return in time, not because of the heaven jade, but because he wanted to help them improve their cultivation. That was why he had found so many darkness crystal crowns. Chun Sichuan's cultivation hadn't reached the 9-crown level yet, and she didn't have a flying mount. She could only run on the ground, but Jidong was flying in the air, so he was naturally much faster than her. After rising into the air, Jidong discovered Chun Sichuan's figure. He accelerated with the flying serpent flash and caught up in the blink of an eye, blocking Chun Sichuan's path. Chun Sichuan stopped and looked at Jidong in front of her. She snorted angrily and said, "Get out of the way. Why are you blocking me? Why are you chasing me?" Jidong was a little dazed by her words. This was the first time Chun Sichuan had lost her temper at him. "Sichuan, I was really confident that I could return safely just now. It's my fault for not notifying you in time. Don't be angry." Chun Sichuan snorted coldly and said, "What does my anger have to do with you? Who told you that I was angry because of you? You don't need to persuade me. You're nobody to me, and I'm nobody to you." Jidong said awkwardly, "We're partners." Chun Sichuan said angrily, "Get out of the way. I want to be alone." Jidong could see that she was really angry this time. He shook his head and said, "No, I won't get out of the way." Chun Sichuan looked at him. Because of her anger, Her chest was constantly moving up and down. Why won't you get out of the way? What qualifications do you have to control me? You don't want me. You didn't tell anyone and took risks alone. Did you treat me as a partner? Jidong really didn't know how to answer Chen Sixuan's words. He couldn't promise Chen Sixuan anything at all. It was impossible for him to not be moved by Chen Sixuan at all. Ever since he met her, she had always been the one taking care of his daily life, food, and meticulously following by his side. Every time he fought, she would assist him from the side. Every time there was danger, she would always follow by his side without hesitation. And that time when he helped her settle the engagement in the hot spring hotel, Jidong really didn't know anything. Since there was no way to face it, he might as well. Jidong's body swayed and his face turned pale. His body went limp and he fell back. As he fell, he said in his heart, "I'm sorry, Sixuan. I know you treat me well, but I'm already a dead man." Chapter 6:15. Although Chen Sixuan had nowhere to vent her frustrations and was embarrassed in front of the heavenly stem saints, her attention had always been on Jidong. When she suddenly saw Jidong fall backward, she was shocked. No matter how angry she was, her love for Jidong had never weakened. She hurriedly pounced forward and hugged Jidong's falling body. "Jidong, what's wrong?" Chen Sixuan asked anxiously. As she spoke, she hurriedly channeled her ultimate E-Wood mana into Hyoheim's body. When the mana entered his body, she immediately felt that Jidong's mana was still rather abundant, and he still had at least 70% to 80% of his cultivation. Obviously, it was not a problem with his mana. Could it be that there was a problem with his soul? A problem with his soul was much more troublesome and dangerous than a problem with his mana. As she thought about it, Chen Sixuan hurriedly and carefully tried to integrate with Jidong's soul. She immediately discovered that the problem was indeed with his soul. Jidong's soul power had been completely sealed, and she could not integrate it at all. Previously, in the Darkness Temple, Jidong had been the main person holding the soul-searching and soul-capturing array. Later, Jidong used his own soul power to determine the location of the short-distance teleportation scroll. In the end, when everyone was teleported away, it was also Jidong who controlled his soul power to communicate with the array. After the communication was done, he rushed out to snatch the Heaven Jade. Coupled with the fact that he had used the teleportation array at the end, there was no doubt that his soul power must have been greatly depleted. Not daring to be negligent, Chen Sixuan hurriedly and carefully activated her divine sense to explore Jidong's brain. After that, she did not know whether to laugh or cry. If it were anyone else, they would definitely think that there was a problem with Jidong's soul. But who was Chen Sixuan? She used to be the queen of the Flaming Bar. Although there was only a negligible trace of divine sense left, it was still not a problem for her to investigate the situation of Jidong's soul at a close distance. She discovered that although Jidong's soul power was greatly depleted, it was rather stable. There was no problem at all. He simply sealed his own soul to prevent her from integrating with his soul. This guy was simply pretending. He pretended to faint when he didn't know how to face himself. Is this still my Jidong? Chen Sixuan could not help but laugh. Given Jidong's character, it was not easy for him to do such a thing. Moreover, she also recalled that she had also pretended to faint in the past. It was just that he had succeeded in faking it, and Jidong had been discovered by him. With this smile, the resentment from before naturally dissipated. She gently punched Jidong's shoulder and said, "You're such an enemy." She did not expose Jidong and just sat there hugging him. This rare intimacy was not easy to come by, and she could not bear to give it up just like that. Hugging him, a sweet feeling arose spontaneously, and she could not help but hug him even tighter. Jidong realized that he had made a huge mistake. This act of fainting had basically turned him into a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, and he could only be at Chen Sixuan's mercy. Being hugged by Chen Sixuan was naturally a very comfortable thing, but the problem was that this stimulation was also incomparably intense. The warm and soft embrace, the faint fragrance of orchids, in addition to the fact that Chen Sixuan was hugging him tightly, and his head was completely buried in the full and tall peaks, That stimulation almost made Ji Dong lose control of himself. He was a young man with blood and qi. At this moment, he could only do his best to hide it, and use the sacred Fire Saint King armor on his wrists and ankles to fiercely prick himself, trying to use the pain to resist Chen Xishuan's powerful attraction. People who often took medicine would easily develop a resistance to medicine. Ji Dong's method of using the sacred Fire Saint King armor to prick himself was becoming more and more difficult to use. His saint-level body was very resistant to pain, and the strong attraction of Chen Xishuan's body made him more and more addicted. Just when Ji Dong didn't know whether he should wake up or not, he felt Chen Xishuan move. In the next moment, he felt his lips being covered by warm and cold lips. With a bang, Ji Dong felt his mind go blank. He never would have thought that Chen Xishuan would be so bold as to kiss him while he was unconscious. Chen Xishuan kissed Ji Dong's lips and thought fiercely in her heart, "I'll let you keep pretending." Her arms were like water snakes tightly hugging Ji Dong. Even if he immediately woke up, it wouldn't be that easy to break free. Moreover, ever since that time at the hot spring hotel, Chen Xishuan clearly knew that she still had a strong attraction to Ji Dong. Ji Dong, Ji Dong. Just as Ji Dong was about to fall, a voice suddenly appeared and saved him. Chen Xishuan instantly raised her head, and her face was completely red. Ji Dong also hurriedly took the opportunity to get up, pretending to have just woken up. "What's wrong with me? My head is so dizzy." Ji Dong lowered his head and didn't dare to look at Chen Xishuan. Chen Xishuan's gaze was looking not far away, and she saw Yao Qianshu soaring over. She couldn't help but grit her teeth in hatred. She didn't know when she would have another opportunity like this. Yao Qianshu quickly discovered them and rushed over. Seeing Ji Dong leaning in Chen Xishuan's arms, he didn't suspect anything and asked with concern, "Ji Dong, are you all right?" Ji Dong shook his head and said, "Qianshu, I'm fine. It's just that I might have used up a little too much of my soul power. Help me back." Chen Xishuan supported him with both hands and stood up with Ji Dong. She whispered in his ear, "Next time, you can pretend." Ji Dong's body stiffened. Only now did he realize that Chen Xishuan had known from the beginning that he was pretending. He couldn't help but feel even more embarrassed, and had Yao Qianshu support himself, not daring to look at Chen Xishuan. When they returned to the transportation matrix, Ajin had already woken up from her dizziness. With her saint-tier physique, Chen Xishuan's attack naturally couldn't make her unconscious for too long. Seeing Chen Xishuan, Ji Dong, and Yao Qianshu return together, Ajin couldn't help but reveal a trace of a complicated light in her eyes. She grabbed a metal element darkness crystal crown from the leather bag and immediately closed her eyes to cultivate. Other than running away, what else could she do? After Chen Xishuan returned, she also didn't say a word. She also grabbed a Ewood crystal crown and sat down. Tianji looked at Ji Dong, smiled, and said, "You guys cultivate too. The terrain here is wide, and I will keep an eye on the surroundings. If I discover anything, I will wake you up immediately." With his high-level saint-tier soul cultivation, he was observing the surroundings. Even if it was darkness Tianji, he wouldn't be able to take advantage of this opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Yao Qianshu had long been impatient. His desire to break through to the 9 crowns was the strongest. He didn't have time to say anything to Ji Dong, and immediately sat down to cultivate. Seeing that his companions had all entered a state of cultivation, Ji Dong took another look at Chen Xishuan. There was still the fragrance that she had left behind on his lips, or had already descended from the sky. Seeing that Ji Dong had returned, he scooted over and rubbed his big head against him. Seeing her, Ji Dong remembered that there was still someone in his vermilion bird bracelet, and hurriedly released Mo from the bracelet. "I thought you weren't going to let me out." As soon as Mo appeared, she glared at Ji Dong. However, her fake expression was quickly seen through by herself, and she excitedly said, "Uncle Yao, you're really amazing. How about you take me as your disciple? You were able to destroy the inner castle of the divine temple of darkness time and time again. If only I had your ability. Take you as my disciple? Forget it." Ji Dong looked at Mo and was speechless. If I took you as my disciple, wouldn't you have to call me Teacher Yao? Moreover, I don't have the time to teach you. Mo snorted and said, How petty. However, no matter what, we'll be allies in the future. I won't talk to you anymore. I'm going to chat with Yen. The saints of light and darkness had come to the divine temple of darkness twice and dealt a heavy blow to the divine temple of darkness. What could be more direct than this? Mo now only had respect for them and no longer had any doubts. Seeing Mo run to Tianji's side, Jidong couldn't help but smile. He didn't immediately enter a state of cultivation. With his ultimate dual fire cultivation and saint-level body, he could absorb these crystal crowns much faster than his companions, so he wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he released a large box from his vermilion burr bracelet. This box was made of special materials, and it was inlaid with dozens of gems of various attributes. Although Jidong didn't know what these gems were, he could tell that they were very valuable from the pure magical attributes they emitted than the 5 elements divine stone. He had obtained this from a forbidden room of Tianji. Apart from the 2 leather bags, there weren't many other things in the forbidden room. The most eye-catching thing was this box, with a few pieces of jade of heaven and some magical equipment stacked together. Although these equipment were not bad, they were meaningless to them. They were all of the dark attribute, and there were about 20 pieces of them. Although there weren't any divine weapons, they were all substandard divine weapons, and some of them emitted magical waves that were close to divine weapons. Although these magical weapons were useless to them, they would be of great help to the resistance against the Divine Temple Alliance. At the very least, they could greatly increase the strength of their high-level magicians. What really interested Jidong was the box in front of him. What he hoped the most was that this box, which was about 1 meter in length, width, and height, could be filled with jade of heaven. In that case, even if the Vulcan sword could not complete its final evolution, it should not be too far from it. Obviously, the things in this box should be very precious. The reason was simple. There was a magical array on the box, and it was not damaged when it was bombarded by the magic skill. Of course, this kind of magical array was not a problem for Jidong. He pressed his right hand on the box, and a faint white light appeared in front of his chest. The white light condensed into a bead. It was the chaos bead. Under Jidong's guidance, the chaos flames quietly rose and covered the box. No matter what kind of magical array the box had, with the absorption of the arcane of chaos, it could absorb all the magical power contained in it. Without the support of magical power, the magical array would be useless no matter how good it was. Sure enough, the magical array in the box was absorbed by the chaos flames in an instant. Without the protection of the magical array, Jidong easily opened the small door on the top with brute force. There was no jade of heaven in the box as Jidong had imagined. After opening it, there were small boxes inside. Although he could not see what was in the box, he was sure that there was no aura of chaos inside. Jidong took the boxes out of the box. There were 15 boxes, and there were words on each of them. Mo, come here for a moment. Jidong called Mo, who was talking to the Oracle of Heaven. What is it, Uncle Monster? Mo bounced over and saw the box and a dozen boxes in front of Jidong. He could not help but be interested. Jidong said, Help me see what's on these boxes. The language of the 5 elements continent was different from the language of the 5 elements continent. He could not recognize the words on the boxes, but Mo definitely could. Mo nodded. He picked up one of the boxes and read, Darkness Divination, 7th Generation, Relic. The Oracle of Heaven also walked over. Hearing Mo's words, he couldn't help exchanging a glance with Jidong. Their gazes met, and both of them revealed a trace of pleasant surprise. These boxes were actually the relics of the previous generations of Darkness Divination. Mo picked up another box. Just as they had guessed, the words on this box were Darkness Divination, 13th Generation, Relic. There were 15 boxes, and inside were the relics of 15 Darkness Divination. Although some of them had been lost, they still contain the majority of the things left behind by the Darkness Divination in the past 2,000 years. Jidong opened a box, within which was a scroll. It was filled with words, and Mo read it aloud. It was a record of Darkness Heaven's Secrets life story. Another box was opened. This time, the harvest was a bit larger. There was a small bottle inside that had the words Soul Recovery Potion written on it. Unfortunately, when they opened it, they found that it was empty. It had clearly been used long ago. Originally, Ji Dong and the Oracle of Heaven had been filled with hope. But when they opened the boxes one by one, they found that there was almost nothing. Besides some records of the life story of the previous darkness divination, even if there was anything left behind, it had already disappeared. There were even some empty boxes. It seems that these relics were all inherited by the next generation of darkness divination. Any good things were taken away by the next generation of darkness divination. Ji Dong helplessly said. As he spoke, he picked up another box. As soon as he touched it, he could feel that this box was different. Of all the boxes left behind by the previous divination, this box was the largest. Previously, it had occupied the entire bottom of the box. Ji Dong opened the box, and in the next moment, when he saw what was inside, he was stunned, and his body trembled uncontrollably. Chapter 616. The moment Ji Dong opened the largest box he had looted from the Darkness Temple, he was completely stunned. It was no wonder that he was so shocked. If it had been anyone else, they might have been a little better, but it was precisely because he was the one who had opened the box that he was even more shocked. In the box, there weren't any magical weapons, gems, or heavenly jades. It could be said that the items inside had no actual value to a mage. However, in Ji Dong's eyes, there were priceless items that could not be bought with money. The box was filled with wine. There were more than a dozen bottles in total, and each bottle looked simple and unadorned. Although there wasn't a trace of wine fragrance, Ji Dong could clearly sense that these bottles weren't empty. They were all filled with wine. Yes, no matter how greedy the darkness Tianji of the past had been, they wouldn't have wanted this wine. To them, this was something that had no benefits at all, so they had simply kept it. Tianji was also stunned. Looked at Ji Dong in confusion. She had never seen such nervousness, excitement, and uncontrollable excitement in his eyes. Even when he had defeated the powerhouses of the Darkness Temple, he hadn't lost his composure like this. Wasn't it just a few bottles of wine? Was there a need to be like this? Ji Dong carefully took out the bottles of wine that belonged to the Darkness Five Elements continent from the box, as if they were the most precious things in the world. He put them down gently and even released a magical power that isolated and Tianji from him. His heart was beating rapidly. If it was really as he thought, then, after he took all the wine out of the box, he quickly took out a small booklet from the vermilion burr bracelet and carefully compared it. Didn't know what Ji Dong was doing, but how could Tianji not know? He gently pulled back and shook his head, indicating that she shouldn't ask. At this time, Ji Dong clearly didn't want to be disturbed the most. After a while, Ji Dong chose 3 bottles from the dozen bottles. When he raised his head again, was shocked to see that Ji Dong's eyes were brimming with tears. He carefully picked up the 3 bottles of wine and sat there in a daze, as if he had gone crazy. Looked up at Tianji and asked, "Yin, what's wrong with Uncle Demon?" Tianji sighed softly. "Let's go. Let's not disturb him. Actually, compared to him, I'm much luckier. At the very least, I had a big sister to take care of me when I was young." However, Ji Dong has never seen his biological parents. If I were in his shoes, I'm afraid I would have collapsed a long time ago. His story is much more interesting than mine. Tianji pulled away, but Ji Dong didn't know about it all. He silently hugged the 3 bottles of wine, his entire person in a daze. Yes, he had obtained the result he had hoped for the most. From the dozen bottles of wine, he had found the last 3 bottles of the 10 famous wines recorded on the wine register. In other words, other than the 3 bottles that had been used as a sacrifice to the flaming bar, he had obtained the remaining 7 bottles. The 10 famous wines were complete. Flaming bar, do you know? I have already found the 10 famous wines that you wanted. When I come to find you, I will finally have no regrets. Ji Dong had brought back more than 1,000 crystal crowns. This was the result of their first time entering the Darkness Shrine. Adding on the hundreds of crystal crowns he had brought back this time, it was enough for the Heavenly Stem holy disciples to absorb for more than 10 days. When Chen Xishuan found out that Ji Dong had found the last 3 bottles of the 10 famous wines, she couldn't help but have mixed feelings. She had an ominous premonition. From the depths of her heart, she never hoped that Ji Dong would find all 10 bottles of wine. If that was the case, he would still have something in his heart. The only thing that comforted her was that Ji Dong didn't seem to have changed at all. Instead, he seemed to have become much more cheerful. When he chatted with his companions, he seemed to have returned to the Ji Dong before he died in the flaming bar. Everyone stopped for a moment. Ji Dong woke up everyone who was cultivating. At this time, everyone had been cultivating for 3 days. The heavenly stem holy disciples woke up from their cultivation and looked at Hyoheim. Ji Dong glanced in the direction of the darkness shrine and said, "According to the time, Dark Tianji must have returned to the darkness shrine. To be honest, I really want to see his expression when he returns." Hearing this, the heavenly stem holy disciples couldn't help but laugh. Yes, it would be strange if Dark Tianji's expression would be good after seeing the darkness shrine in such a state. He probably hadn't experienced such depression ever since he had inherited the position of Dark Tianji. Ji Dong continued, "However, we have to leave now. After Dark Tianji is furious, he will definitely find a way to find us. We will go and contact the Heavenly Secret Alliance now. We have achieved our initial goal. Next, there will be a long tug of war. The intelligence of your alliance is very important to us." Mo nodded obediently and said, "Okay, big brother Ji Dong." That day, after Tianji told her about Ji Dong's story, was so touched that she cried for a long time. Only then did she know that Ji Dong had experienced so much. The origin of the Red Lotus heavenly fire shocked her, and the love between Ji Dong and the flaming bar moved her even more. From that day onwards, she no longer called Ji Dong Uncle Monster. Instead, she obediently called Ji Dong Big Brother. Her attitude towards Ji Dong took a 180-degree turn. No matter what, this place was a little too close to the darkness shrine. If Dark Tianji deliberately looked for them, he could use the soul power of a peak saint-level practitioner to scan them. He would definitely find some clues. Ji Dong didn't want the teleportation formation they had left here to be discovered by Dark Tianji. Mo took out the map of the darkness continent that Ji Dong had given her previously and pointed out the location of the contact point. She still only released the sacred evolution fire dragon. Ji Dong, Chen Xishuan, and Tianji worked together to release several peak saint-level soul powers to envelop the group of heavenly stem holy disciples. Only then did they head towards their destination. With a sufficiently powerful peak saint-level soul power to cover them, even if Dark Tianji's soul power scanned them, it would be difficult for him to discover their existence as long as they were not close enough. Just as Ji Dong had said, Dark Tianji had already returned to the Darkness Shrine. Darkness Shrine, Inner Castle. Dark Tianji's youthful face was now a little distorted. The Thunder Emperor, Fury, stood behind him without saying a word. His expression was calm, and there were no visible fluctuations in his emotions. In front of Dark Tianji, there were 8 purple-robe high priests who were as silent as cicadas in winter. The forbidden room at the side was now completely open. The solemn door opened, revealing an empty space inside. "Good, all of you are very good," Dark Tianji said through gritted teeth. Every purple-robed high priest knew that the anger in Lord Tianji's heart had been raised to the limit. In just 10 days, you actually let someone sneak into the Darkness Shrine twice and killed thousands of people. What else can you bunch of trash do? There were only 10 of them. Only 10 of them. What about you? 10 honorable experts and tens of thousands of demon masters, but you couldn't even stop 10 of them. Even after activating the Dark Chaos Defense Formation, they still managed to escape. Moreover, even the soul-searching formation was destroyed, and even my forbidden room was ransacked. Good, all of you are really good. The incomparably sharp, murderous intent filled the highest room of the Darkness Inner Castle with an oppressive feeling. The 8 purple-robe high priests were all pale as they endured Dark Tianji's tyrannical pressure. They couldn't even say anything to defend themselves. In reality, when the truth was right in front of them, any kind of explanation would be useless. So many dark demon masters, including the two purple-robed high priests, had died. The Darkness Shrine's inner castle had been broken into twice, and Dark Tianji's forbidden room had been ransacked. No one would be able to endure this. Dark Tianji's gaze finally froze on the chief high priest's face. His sharp, murderous intent also fell on this level, 98 honorable expert. Such a powerful dark demon master also didn't dare to move in the face of Dark Tianji's anger. His mind was blank. He knew that he was finished. Dark Tianji might not kill all the purple-robe high priests, but someone had to take responsibility. Otherwise, Dark Tianji's anger would never be appeased. Dark Tianji slowly raised his right hand. His entire hand emitted a layer of dazzling golden light. The light flickered, and the sharp aura caused a series of puffing sounds to appear in the air. Wait a minute. Have mercy. Just when all the violet-robed high priests thought that the chief high priest was done for, a deep voice suddenly rang out. Who dares to interrupt when Dark Tianji is in such a rage? This was something that the purple-robed high priests didn't think would happen. They subconsciously raised their heads and looked in the direction of the voice. Their gazes all fell on Fury. After Dark Tianji brought Fury back and learned about the destruction of the Darkness Shrine by the holy disciples, he angrily gathered all the purple-robed high priests here. He didn't introduce Fury to them at all. They only felt that this young man's cultivation was not low, and he seemed to have a pure and unyielding aura. However, they were more worried about their own safety, so they didn't pay much attention to him. Fury didn't look any different from before, except that he was more composed. With the help of Dark Tianji, his mana had successfully broken through to the 9th crown, and he had become an unprecedented Yang Lightning Attribute Supreme powerhouse. What surprised the purple-robed high priests even more was that after Fury's words, Dark Tianji's hand that was about to slap the chief high priest suddenly stopped, and the tyrannical mana on it also dissipated. He turned back to look at Fury. Although his anger didn't diminish in the slightest, it was obvious that he didn't vent his anger on Fury. The purple-robe high priest couldn't help but be shocked. Was this still the Lord Tianji they knew? Even the ultimate weapon of the Darkness Shrine, Li Yonghao, didn't dare to interrupt when Dark Tianji was in a rage. However, what Fury said next shocked the purple-robed high priests even more. "Father, can you listen to me?" Fury said in a deep voice. "Father? This young man who looks like he's in his 30s is Lord Tianji's son?" The purple-robed high priests even forgot their fear at this moment, and they looked at Fury in a daze. They had never heard that their Lord Tianji had a descendant, and they had never even heard that Dark Tianji had a relationship with any woman. Did this son appear out of thin air? "Speak," Dark Tianji said coldly. Fury said, "Although the Divine Temple suffered a great loss this time, we can't blame the purple-robed high priests entirely. In a sense, this is also our mistake. After all, we couldn't stop the invasion of the Darkness Shrine, and we only knew that they had infiltrated our Dark Continent after the Divine Temple was attacked. I know Ji Dong too well. My little junior is blessed by nature, and even the goddess of the Flaming Bar fell in love with him. You can imagine how outstanding he is. Sometimes, I feel numb to the miracles he has created. According to the description of the purple-robed high priests, he should be different now. As far as I know, his fire god sword wasn't as powerful as it is now, so he must have had some fortuitous encounters. Father, the most important thing now is to find them. Even if the purple-robed high priests are in the wrong, this isn't the time to punish them. We need people." Hearing Fury's words, Dark Tianji's expression softened a little, and he said faintly, "It seems that I have underestimated this so-called heavenly stem holy king. His magic power hasn't even reached level 90, and he can already cause so much trouble. Have you found a way to deal with him? Based on your familiarity with him, what will we do next?" Fury said, "Father, don't underestimate my little junior. Although his cultivation hasn't reached 9 crowns, his overall strength is definitely not inferior to a beginner Saint tier expert. You should know that the strength of his body and soul have already reached the Saint tier and the fusion of the Yin and Yang flames. His magic power isn't something that can be explained with just 8 crowns." Dark Tianji frowned slightly and turned to look at the chief high priest who had just escaped death, and said, "Is that divine artifact of his really that powerful?" The chief high priest hurriedly said, "Yes, that sword of his is very strange, as if it has a power that can break through everything. When they first came, he killed 6 of our red-robed high priests with one strike, and broke through a 5 elements boundary, seriously injuring the 10 red-robed high priests who laid the boundary. Although that was a high-level ultimate skill, if it wasn't for that strange sword, a high-level ultimate skill wouldn't have such power. The second time he came, he used that sword to perform a top-notch ultimate skill, and broke through the inner castle's defensive formation with one strike." Chapter 617. Darkness Tianji asked Fury, "What's the name of his sword?" Fury answered, "It's called the Fire God's Sword." Ji Dong obtained 2 substandard god weapons and combined them into one. Fire God's Sword? He Tianji pondered for a moment, then looked at his empty, forbidden room again, and the anger in his eyes reignited. He suddenly separated his hands, and a tremendous force blasted the 8 purple-robed high priests away at the same time, slamming them into the stone wall behind them. Darkness Tianji said coldly, "I'll remember your lives for now. If it weren't for my son, I would have let you taste the pain of your souls being devoured. Pass down my order. Search the entire continent. Find them as soon as possible." The 8 purple-robed high priests let out a long sigh of relief after escaping from death. Although their bones were almost broken by Dark Secret's attack, they were still alive. They said, "Thank you, Dark Secrets, for not killing us. Thank you, young master, for pleading on our behalf." Darkness Tianji waved his hand and said, "All of you are dismissed." Yes. The purple-robed high priests retreated. Darkness Tianji turned to Fury, a cold glint in his eyes as he said, "Are you hiding something from me?" Fury's heart trembled. "Father, what do you mean by that?" Darkness Tianji snorted coldly. "To be able to teleport out of my darkness shrine through the dark chaos defensive formation. How can this ability be ordinary? Where do they get it from? Why didn't you report it to me? If it weren't for this ability, how would they have dared to attack the shrine?" Fury replied calmly, "I was careless. Father, if I'm not wrong, Ji Dong and the others should have used teleportation scrolls. Before we went to the Holy Evil Island, we went to the foolish rich Chamber of Commerce first. Not only did we obtain 3 divine weapons, but Ji Dong also took about 30 scrolls with him before he left. He didn't show them any of us, so we don't know what they're used for. Now it seems that there should be a large number of teleportation scrolls among them. He used his saint-level soul to activate the scrolls to teleport everyone away. Have you forgotten? When I lured them to the Holy Evil Island, Ji Dong suddenly activated a scroll and brought them away. Otherwise, they would have been annihilated by us." Darkness Tianji's expression softened a little. He nodded and said, "They could be considered lucky to be able to find so many teleportation scrolls. Even our darkness continent rarely has such scrolls. You can't be blamed for this. On the other hand, Ji Dong's luck is pretty good. How do you think we should deal with them now? Based on your familiarity with them, do you have any way to find them or lure them to take the bait?" According to Ji Dong's plan, he came to our darkness continent this time mainly to deal with the Dark Demon Army. Although you left the Dark Heavenly Disciples to guard the Holy Evil Island, it's not safe. After all, it's a vast territory. If Ji Dong and the other Dark Heavenly Disciples return to the Holy Evil Island after attacking the Darkness Temple, they will definitely bring great losses to us. Only you can guard the island in person. After more than a year, when the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire is dispelled, we can attack the 5 Elements continent in one fell swoop and destroy their main force. At that time, it won't be too late to take revenge. Darkness Tianji frowned and said, "No, the Darkness Temple is my foundation. How can I give it up so easily? As for the front line of the Holy Evil Island, don't worry too much. I have a way to repair the teleportation formation here. Once it is repaired, I can go to the Holy Evil Island at any time. Humph, I'll wait for them here. If they have the guts to come again, I'll definitely tear that boy named Ji Dong into pieces. As long as I kill those Dark Heavenly Disciples, there will be no one else in the 5 Elements continent that I care about." Fury said, "Father, The enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. Moreover, the five elements continent is so vast that it's too difficult to find the 10 of them. Apart from you, we don't have the strength to defeat them. What if they don't attack the darkness temple, but just cause trouble on the continent, or even cut off the supply of our frontline army? Fury said, Father, the enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. Moreover, our dark five elements continent is vast. It is too difficult to find just 10 of them. Other than you, we don't have the strength to defeat them. What if they don't attack the temple and only cause trouble on the continent? What if they cut off the supplies of our frontline army? Dark Fate sneered, let them decide. Although we have millions of troops on the Holy Evil Island, in the past 3 years since the Scarlet Lotus Heavenly Flame appeared, I've moved almost all the available rations to the Holy Evil Island and built 10 granaries. Almost all the resources of the continent are concentrated there. Not to mention the fact that the Scarlet Lotus Heavenly Flame can only burn for less than a year and a half. Even if it burns for 3 years, we have enough rations to support it. As for the commoners, let them kill them. What's the point of these ants' lives? Just like you said, as long as we can attack the Radiance continent, we won't lack anything. Isn't the richness of the Radiance continent prepared for us? Speaking up to this point, Dark Tianji said earnestly, Fury, in terms of destruction, no one is better than me. But in terms of construction, it's not my forte. After we have united the 2 continents, the responsibility of construction and restoration will be yours. In the future, you will be the master of these 2 continents, and I will be the faith of these 2 continents. At this point, he smiled coldly and said, The generations of Dark Tianji are actually all fools. They did not hesitate to sacrifice themselves just to invade the radiant 5 elements continent. They said that they wanted to spread darkness to every corner of the world. They're simply morons. I am now Dark Tianji, and I'm only 1 step away from becoming a god. In the future, the darkness and radiant continents will forever be under the rule of our family. You have to work hard. I can find countless concubines for you, so that you can have descendants as soon as possible, so that you can inherit our family business. Hearing Dark Tianji's words, Fury felt a chill run down his spine. He finally understood that he and the light heavenly saints had underestimated him all along. His cruel and cold father actually had such a lofty ideal. It could be said that he was the most selfish person in the world. He actually wanted to unify the 2 continents at the expense of all the benefits of the entire Darkness 5 Elements continent. After following Dark Tianji for a few dozen days, Fury had already deeply understood how miserable the lives of the commoners in the Darkness 5 Elements continent were. The entire situation in the Darkness 5 Elements continent could no longer be described as just destitute. On this similarly vast continent, there was no concept of a country at all. After Dark Tianji gathered all the Devil Masters in the Darkness 5 Elements continent, he used this unrivaled power to squander the accumulated wealth of the entire continent for the sake of spreading darkness to every corner of the world. He did not build anything, and when he met resistance, he would kill and destroy. In the short span of a few decades, the Darkness 5 Elements continent had already become a boiling cauldron of resentment. Disaster victims were everywhere, and the only ones who could eat were the soldiers and Devil Masters. On the way back to the Darkness Temple, he saw large areas of wasteland, and countless disaster victims had died on the road. Originally, when Fury decided to help the radiant heavenly stem saints to deal with Dark Tianji, there was always a barrier in his heart. After all, no matter what, Dark Tianji was still his father. How difficult would it be to place righteousness before family? However, when he saw with his own eyes the plight of the people in the Dark 5 Elements continent, he finally made up his mind to persevere. Dark Tianji had already destroyed countless families in the Dark 5 Elements continent, and countless innocent commoners had died because of his so-called ideals. He definitely did not want such a situation to happen in the Radiant 5 Elements continent, especially after the Battle of the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire was removed. The total combat strength of both sides, including logistical supplies, would probably exceed 10 million people. In his dreams at night, Fury had already woken up from the dreams of mountains of corpses and seas of blood more than once. At that time, he had already made up his mind that no matter what, he would use his own strength to prevent that scene from happening. Dark Tianji was only his father, but if this war really happened and the Dark Army invaded the radiant five-element continent, how many families would be destroyed? How many fathers would watch their children die? Fury, Fury. Dark Tianji's somewhat displeased voice woke Fury up. What are you thinking about? Why are you so engrossed? Dark Tianji asked unhappily. Fury hurriedly said, Father, I'm looking forward to the world where you unify the two continents. However, Father, since we have enough food reserves at the front lines, shouldn't we distribute some of the newly produced food to the commoners? No matter what, the Darkness Continent is our foundation. I've heard from your subordinates that the resentment of the commoners in our continent isn't low. Dark Tianji snorted coldly and said, What does the life and death of those lowly commoners have to do with me? I already have an invincible army, and all the best supplies must be given to the army and my devil army. Just let those commoners die. If more people die, the demand for food will naturally decrease. Fury let out a long sigh in his heart. He knew that it was useless no matter what he said. The thoughts in Dark Tianji's mind had long since solidified, and it wasn't something he could change. Who told you that the resentment of the commoners in our Darkness Continent is great? Dark Tianji asked in a deep voice. Fury didn't hide anything and said, It was a Yong Hao. Other than the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint, I can't come into contact with anyone else. You have no intention of hiding anything from me. Fury, you must always remember that you are my only successor. As for Li Yonghao, if it wasn't for the fact that I still need him now and that he has a certain amount of influence in the Darkness Devil Army, I would have killed him a long time ago. The Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint is nothing more than a chess piece in my eyes. Once the Red Lotus Heavenly Flames are dispelled, and I find the last Saint-level Chrysanthemum Pig and devour it to become a god, the mission of the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint will come to an end. Fury was dumbfounded as he listened to Dark Tianji's words. He had never expected that Dark Tianji would actually want to kill the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint. The chill in his heart grew deeper, and he sighed in his heart. The only person his father truly cares about is himself. Junior brother, you must act quickly. You must not let him find a chrysanthemum pig. If he really becomes a god, then our world will probably be destroyed in his hands. Central City was one of the few cities on the Five Elements continent that could be considered relatively intact and could barely be considered prosperous. Before the Darkness Temple ruled the Five Elements continent, this city used to be the capital of the Dark Central Country on the Five Elements continent. Its status was the same as the central city of the Five Elements continent. The reason why this city could be considered prosperous and complete was not because it used to have a very high status on this continent, but because this main city was very close to the Darkness Temple, only about 300 kilometers away. It was the only main city near the Darkness Temple, and the resources that were transported to the Darkness Temple had to pass through here. The Devil Masters of the Darkness Temple would often come here to spend time, so this city was considered prosperous. Moreover, the Dark Devil Masters all had families. There was another reason why this city was prosperous, and that was any family that lived here must have a family member who was a Devil Master of the Darkness Devil Army. Darkness Tianji was extremely cruel to the commoners, but he was extremely kind to the Dark Devil Masters. Otherwise, he would not have received the support of all the Dark Devil Masters. As the saying went, the most dangerous place was the safest place. Darkness Tianji would never have imagined that the Light Mingan holy disciples would actually be in this city that was so close to the Darkness Temple. After all, if he deliberately wanted to, with his soul cultivation that was close to the god level, he could directly scan the city 300 kilometers away. The Light Mingan holy disciples had sneaked into this city last night under the cover of the night. At this moment, they were in a residence that could barely be considered luxurious, with 3 courtyards. In this central city, a family that could live in such a courtyard would at least have a 7-crown Devil Master serving in the Darkness Devil Army. At this moment, the 10 Light Mingan holy disciples were sitting in the main hall of the living room. Their gazes were calm, and they did not forget to absorb a few darkness crystal crowns while waiting. Of course, this was only on the surface. Peak saint-level soul powers of Jidong, Tianji, and Chun Sichuan have been enveloping everyone. So even if darkness Tianji really scanned them, they would not be afraid. Chapter 618. Chun Sichuan was one of the few holy disciples who were not in a state of cultivation. Other than her, only Jidong was sitting on the main seat with a smile on his face. This kind of situation had never happened since Chun Sichuan knew him when she was still raging flame. Jidong was not cultivating when he needed to improve his strength the most. Instead, he was smiling and daydreaming, as if he had found something happy. Chun Sichuan was worried like never before. She regretted that she had entered a state of cultivation earlier, because she was angry with Jidong that day. She did not see Jidong's expression when he drank the wine. If she had been awake that day, she would have done everything she could to destroy the wine. Even if Jidong hated her now, she had to do it. However, it was too late to say anything now. Jidong had already obtained the last 3 bottles of the 10 famous wines. Chun Sichuan understood Jidong very well. Although she was not sure what Jidong was going to do, it was very likely that Jidong would do something that she could not accept now that he had gathered these 10 bottles of wine. In particular, after gathering the 10 famous wines, Jidong's emotions had obviously changed. The occasional coldness on his face had disappeared, and the loneliness in the depths of his eyes had also disappeared. There was always a smile on his face, as if he was very comfortable in this dark 5-elements continent. The other holy disciples naturally thought that this was a good sign. Jidong's personality was extremely unyielding, and everyone was very clear about this. At this moment, he had softened a little, and his companions could get along with him more harmoniously. However, Chun Sichuan was very worried. This situation seemed to be indicating something to her, but she could not ask about it. At this time, the only thing she could do was to curse the detestable God King of the God Realm, the God of Evil. Jidong, why don't you cultivate for a while? Mo has already gone to contact the people from his organization. You should be back soon, Chun Sichuan said softly to Hyoheim. Jidong smiled and shook his head. It's okay. After all, this place is relatively close to the Darkness Temple. It's better for me to help everyone guard it. Although we have achieved a stage victory, we can't be careless at this time. Sichuan, go and cultivate too. It's enough with Tianji's and my combined soul control. It won't be easy for Dark Tianji to find us. With his soul cultivation at the middle stage of the saint level and Tianji's soul cultivation at the high stage of the saint level, although they had not reached the peak of the saint level, they were almost there. Without Chun Sichuan, their protection would not be affected. After all, although Dark Tianji's soul cultivation was very high, it would be greatly weakened if it was released from the Dark Temple 150 kilometers away from the Darkness Temple. Just as Chun Sichuan was about to say something, the sound of noisy footsteps could be heard from outside. From the speed of the footsteps, one could tell how anxious they were. Jidong released a wave of soul waves and woke up his companions from their cultivation. Chun Sichuan could only swallow the words she wanted to say for the time being. She knew that it would be useless even if she said anything now. She only hoped that Jidong could at least do what she had told him back when they were in the flaming bar, and use 10 years to commemorate her. At least that way, there would be enough time for her to change him. Although Chun Sichuan was getting less and less hopeful about this, Jidong's unrepentant love for the flaming bar had also made her unable to extricate herself. I've made everyone wait for a long time. At this moment, someone had already rushed in from outside. It was Mo's father, Lightning. There was an unconcealable excitement on his face as he quickly walked forward. After entering the hall, he immediately stopped in his tracks and bowed deeply to everyone. Mr. Lightning, there's no need to be so polite. Jidong smiled. The fact that Lightning could personally rush here meant many things. One must know that Lightning was different from them. He didn't have a flying magical beast like the sacred evolution fire dragon that could conceal himself, nor did he have a saint-tier soul cultivation that could conceal his aura. He had definitely put in a lot of effort to be able to cross almost half the continent to rush here in just over 10 days. Lightning said emotionally, "No, I'm not being polite. I'm just thanking you on behalf of the millions and millions of commoners in the Darkness continent. This time, I really see hope." After saying this, he moved to the side in a flash. Another two people walked in from outside. One of them was Mo. At this moment, this young lady was holding onto a hale and hearty old man. This old man had a dignified aura and was about the same height as Ji-dong. Although he didn't look young, his back was ramrod straight. Lightning's appearance clearly bore some resemblance to him. Clearly, they were related by blood. The old man was like lightning. The first thing he did after entering was to deeply bow to the radiant Mingan holy disciples. "Thank you, everyone." Lightning said, "Holy disciples, this is my father, Shan Yu. He's also the vice president of our organization. He's usually stationed in the central city. A few days ago, he went out to handle some matters, so he's a little late. Please forgive me. Father, this is the radiant Mingan holy king, Mr. Ji-dong." Ji-dong said, "Vice President Shan Yu, nice to meet you. I believe you know why we're here. Right now, time is of the essence. We're here to cause irreparable damage to the army of Darkness Tianji before the Red Lotus heavenly fire is extinguished. Only then will we be able to avoid the holy war that will cause great destruction. At the very least, we have to limit the holy war to only the holy evil island." From the demonic waves emitted by Shan Yu, Ji-dong could tell that he was also a dark devil master with the cultivation of a paragon. However, he should have just broken through to 9 crowns not long ago. He really didn't expect that there would be a paragon existence in the Heavenly Secret Alliance. Moreover, he was only the vice president. What kind of person was the president of this organization? Shan Yu made an inviting gesture and said in a loud and clear voice, "Respected Mr. Ji-dong, let's sit down and talk." Everyone took their seats, and Mo stood behind Shan Yu. Her obedient appearance didn't seem like her usual mischievous self. Shan Yu said, "Mr. Ji-dong, I understand what you mean, and I'm also very clear about the purpose of your visit this time. Darkness Tianji has caused great destruction on the continent. To put it more seriously, our entire Darkness 5 Elements continent is simply immersed in the pain of destruction. If Darkness Tianji isn't eliminated, everything will be in vain. Through you and the holy disciples attacking the Darkness Temple twice, we've seen hope. The first news we can provide you now is that Darkness Tianji has returned to the Darkness Temple alone. The Darkness Tianji saints are all left on the holy evil island. I wonder if this is an opportunity for all of you?" Ji-dong looked at Shan Yu, and his eyes flickered. He said, "Vice President Shan Yu means that we should attack Darkness Tianji?" Shan Yu nodded seriously and said, "Without the help of the Darkness Tianji saints, Darkness Tianji is isolated and helpless. With everyone's strength, it shouldn't be impossible to kill him. As long as Darkness Tianji dies, our Darkness 5 Elements continent will definitely fall into chaos. Our organization can also take advantage of the situation to rise. After all, more than 90% of the combat power of the Darkness 5 Elements continent is on the holy evil island. Without the threat of Darkness Tianji, we are confident that we can influence the majority of the continent in a short period of time." Ji-dong shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that won't work. With our current strength, it can be said that we will die if we face Darkness Tianji. You think too lightly of Darkness Tianji. Peak Saint level cultivation is not that easy to deal with. Among us, there are only 2 people who have broken through to the 9 Crown realm. Even in this attack on the Darkness Temple, we also did our best. Moreover, we relied on teleportation scrolls to escape unscathed. Now is not a good time to attack Darkness Tianji." Shan Yu frowned slightly and said, "But if we don't seize this opportunity to kill Darkness Tianji now, I'm afraid that we won't have another chance in the future. Once the Scarlet Lotus heavenly flames are extinguished, then Darkness Tianji will definitely gather with the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saints. At that time, would all of you be able to resist them? Moreover, at that time, they will have tens of thousands of Darkness magicians around them. To put it bluntly, it won't be a problem to sweep the entire Light 5 Elements continent." Ji-dong looked at Shan Yu and suddenly fell silent. His extremely penetrating gaze met with Shan Yu's. causing the heart of the vice president of the Resistance Tianji organization to tremble. His 9-crown realm cultivation seemed to have no effect at all. Shan Yu said with some doubt, "Mr. Ji Dong, what are you doing?" Ji Dong smiled and shook his head. "Nothing. I'm just very curious. Why do you, Vice President Shan Yu, want us to go head-on against Darkness Tianji? With your cultivation, you should understand what the consequences are. Not to mention that the possibility of our victory is infinitely small. Even if we can really kill Darkness Tianji, the price we have to pay will be heavy injuries, or even perish together. If that's the case, when the Darkness Army commanded by the Darkness Tianji Saints invades our Light 5 Elements continent, will we be able to resist? The loss of Darkness Tianji will only affect the top strength of the Darkness 5 Elements continent, and not the overall strength of the Darkness 5 Elements continent. In this way, if Darkness Tianji doesn't make a move, we will do our best to occupy as many places as we can, consolidate our resources, and cut off their supplies at the front line. If Darkness Tianji can't take it anymore and is successfully lured away by us, then all of you can attack the Darkness Divine Temple again and destroy Darkness Tianji's base. Moreover, you will be able to kill a large number of Darkness Magicians. We will also do our best to inform all of you about the various aspects of the Darkness continent as soon as possible so that all of you can take action. What do you think? It's impossible for Darkness Tianji to stay in the Darkness Divine Temple forever, but now he has no choice but to stay in the Darkness Divine Temple. How about this? In order to express our sincerity, we'll temporarily stay here while Darkness Tianji is wary of all of you. We'll do our best to start all kinds of uprisings across the entire continent. This way, if Darkness Tianji doesn't move, we'll do our best to occupy more places, consolidate their resources, and cut off their supplies at the front line. If Darkness Tianji can't take it anymore and is successfully lured away by us, then all of you can attack the Darkness Divine Temple once again and destroy Darkness Tianji's base. Moreover, you'll be able to kill a large number of Darkness Magicians. We'll also do our best to inform all of you about the various aspects of the Darkness continent as soon as possible so that you can take action. What do you think? Ji Dong's gaze was gradually turning sharp, and Shan Yu frowned deeply. He sighed and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Ji Dong. I think you might have misunderstood. This time around, you guys were able to inflict heavy damage to the Darkness Divine Temple twice, causing me to be completely unable to estimate how powerful all of you are. This is why I made such a suggestion. If you guys can kill Darkness Tianji, it'll obviously be very beneficial to the situation on our continent. What do you think?" Ji Dong nodded slightly and said, "This strategy is clearly much better than directly attacking Darkness Tianji. Since that's the case, let's do as Vice President Shan Yu suggested. With all of you organizing revolts in various places to cooperate, we will naturally be able to move more freely." Shan Yu stood up and said, "There's no time to lose. I will go and make arrangements now. Shan Lei will be in contact with all of you and inform you of all kinds of information. What do you think? Will all of you stay here and wait for an opportunity, or?" Ji Dong said, "We will stay here and cultivate for the time being. As for when we will take action, that will depend on the Vice President's actions in various areas." As he spoke, he also stood up and sent Shan Ben all the way to the door of the meeting hall before stopping. This Vice President Shan Yu bid farewell to Ji Dong and left in a hurry. Ji Dong's expression was the same as usual, and after the holy disciples of the Radiant Light sect glanced at Shan Yu, almost all of them closed their eyes and continued to cultivate. They were already used to letting Ji Dong handle all kinds of matters. Although this was a little too reliant on him, they could also better concentrate on their cultivation. Ji Dong watched as Shan Yu's figure disappeared from his line of sight, and a profound light flashed in the depths of his eyes. Only then did he return to the meeting hall and say to Shan Lei, "Mr. Shan Lei, could you arrange a slightly larger room for us to cultivate together?" Shan Lei said, "Won't all of you need to rest for a while? We have enough accommodation here, and you can rest assured about safety." Ji Dong shook his head and said, "Cultivation is the best rest. Now is not the time to sleep." Shan Lei nodded and said, "All right, then please follow me." Emoer said, "I want to go too." Shan Lei glared at her. and said, "No, you will disturb the holy disciples." Chapter 619. Lightning arranged for Guangming and the rest of the holy disciples to stay in a room that was about 200 square meters in size. There were all sorts of items in the room. He also told Guangming and the rest of the holy disciples to let them know if they needed anything, and he would try his best to satisfy them. After arranging everything, he pulled the reluctant Imo out of the room. "Jidong, why did you choose to stay here?" Chen Xishuan asked Hioheim, puzzled. Others did not pay attention to his conversation with Shan Yu, but Chen Xishuan and Tianji, who did not need to cultivate, had been listening. Tianji released his soul power, isolating everything in the room from the outside world. He said, "Jidong, I also feel that there's something wrong with Vice Chairman Shan Yu. Based on what we've done in the Darkness Temple, we've already fully displayed our strength. He should be trying his best to cooperate with us." However, he immediately raised his own opinion the moment he arrived, and wants us to cooperate with him instead. This is somewhat abnormal. Jidong smiled and said, "Of course there's a problem with Deputy Chairman Shan Yu, and it's not a small problem. However, his arrival this time also allowed me to see some of the background of the Heavenly Secrets Organization. This so-called resistance organization that has existed for hundreds of years. I'm afraid it's not that simple. If you were Dark Heavenly Secrets, would you allow an organization with a 9-crown devil to continue existing? I definitely do not believe that with Dark Tianji's control over the 5 Elements continent, they cannot find out about Deputy President Shan Yu's existence." Chen Xishuan asked doubtfully, "Since you feel that there is something wrong with them, why do you still want us to stay here? This place is so close to the Darkness Shrine. Wouldn't Dark Tianji be welcomed at any time?" Jidong shook his head and said, "No, although there is something wrong with Deputy President Shan Yu and the Tianji Resistance Alliance, their opposition to Dark Tianji is sincere. What I mean by saying all this is that there must be an extremely powerful person under Dark Tianji who is related to the Tianji Resistance Alliance, and thus help them conceal their strength from Dark Tianji, causing Dark Tianji to ignore the Tianji Resistance Alliance. Therefore, we will definitely be safe here. Deputy President Shan Yu is a little too eager for quick success and thinks too simply of us. Yes, we really hope that Dark Tianji dies, but we will not foolishly fight recklessly." Miao Miao said with some admiration, "Jidong, what's wrong with your brain? Why didn't I see these problems? Logically speaking, my grasp of human nature should not be any worse than yours. I really don't think that there is any big problem with the Tianji Resistance Alliance. After all, it is impossible for them to find a more suitable ally than us, and both sides have the same goal. However, after listening to your analysis, it is not bad. However, doesn't the Tianji Resistance Alliance understand that if we die in the hands of Dark Tianji, they will have no chance? As long as they are not fools, they should understand this problem. In that case, why do they still want to push us into the fire pit?" Jidong smiled and said, "Miao Miao, you are really modest. When it comes to understanding human nature, you should be better than me. However, you have always had a problem, and that is, you have not considered from the standpoint of the race. Yes, the Tianji Resistance Alliance does have the same goal as us, and we are also their best partners. It can even be said that we are the only partners that can help them. However, there is one thing that you have forgotten. One of us is from the 5 Elements continent of light, and the other is the aborigines of the 5 Elements continent of darkness. There is a big problem here. After all, we are not people of the 5 Elements continent of darkness. From a standpoint of the race, we will always be their enemy." Miao Miao came to a sudden realization and said, "I understand a little. After all, they are darkness, and we are light. If everything is completed according to our plan, the combat power of the Tianji Resistance Alliance will be greatly weakened. This is good for them for the time being, but when the Holy War really breaks out, it will be harmful. After all, they will never want our Radiance continent to unify the Darkness continent." Jidong nodded and said, "Exactly. Moreover, don't you think it is very strange? With our identity and our performance in the Dark Temple this time, if you are the leader of the Tianji Resistance Alliance, will you come and meet us in person?" Miao Miao said, "Yes, I will definitely come. Whether it is to make use of them or to form a sincere alliance, I will definitely come to show my sincerity. Jidong nodded and said, "That's right. Our performance is good enough. Even if it is just the first time we rushed into the Dark Temple, it is enough to shock the Tianji Resistance Alliance, which has always been suppressed. They will definitely have enough time to let their president come here to meet us. Even Thunderbolt can come from so far away, so why can't their president come here? This makes me think that the president of the Tianji Resistance Alliance not only holds a high position under the Dark Tianji Resistance Alliance, but we may also have met him before. Moreover, his identity must be quite special. This is the only way to explain why he did not come in person. We know each other, and it is not convenient for him to show up." After listening to Ji Dong's analysis, the Saints of Light could not help but focus their attention. Their understanding of the Five Elements continent was extremely simple, and there were very few people who knew it. For a moment, they could not figure out who the person Ji Dong was talking about was. Ji Dong smiled and said, "Their biggest failure is sending Shan Yu, the vice president. Actually, if Shan Yu had pretended to be this vice president, or if they had sent a vice president with a weaker cultivation, I would not have been so suspicious. I would even have guessed that Shan Yu is the real president of the Tianji Resistance Alliance. However, this prediction has obviously been shattered by the appearance of Shan Yu. Shan Yu is Shan Yu's father, and he is also a 9-crown sovereign powerhouse. Under such a dual identity, Shan Yu's identity cannot be higher than Shan Yu's. Therefore, Shan Yu must be the real vice president." Chun Sichuan said, "Ji Dong, have you already guessed who the real president of the Tianji Resistance Alliance is?" Ji Dong smiled and said, "Although I'm not right, I'm not far from it. Actually, it's very simple. Just now, Shan Yu made 2 suggestions. The first suggestion was for us to directly attack Dark Tianji. We have been the Five Elements continent for so long, and we have appeared in the Darkness Temple twice. Based on their spies in the Darkness Temple and their investigations on us, they should have some judgment of our strength and naturally understand that it is impossible for us to kill Dark Tianji. Even if we perform well, we will only injure him. Even if we really have some ability that they do not know about to kill Dark Tianji, we will still have to pay a painful price in the end. Think about it. If a powerful force comes to clean up the mess at this time, killing the heavily injured Dark Tianji, or us who are lucky enough to survive, then who will benefit the most? After I rejected this suggestion, Shan Yu made a second suggestion, which was to let them harass all over the continent and let us focus our attacks on the Darkness Temple. However, he did not mention the situation on the Holy Evil Island at all. Obviously, he tried to avoid us from attacking the Dark Army on the Holy Evil Island. This situation is not normal, because even if Dark Tianji is dead, with the strength of the Tianji Resistance Alliance, can they fight against the millions of Dark Army on the Holy Evil Island? Therefore, this proves one thing to me, and that is, the person who is resisting Tianji Resistance Alliance on the Holy Evil Island can control the Dark Army, or at least control a part of the Dark Army. Such a person is even rarer in the hands of Dark Tianji. Based on the above 2 points and my analysis just now, the president of the Tianji Resistance Alliance has the above characteristics. He is powerful, at least above the 9 crowns cultivation, and is an acquaintance of ours. He is also deeply trusted by Dark Tianji and is not in the Darkness Temple. Moreover, he can control at least a part of the Dark Army on the Holy Evil Island. In this way, the identity of this person is already obvious. Am I right, Mr. Shan Yu? When Ji Dong said the last sentence, there was an obvious playful expression on his face. However, the Radiance Gang holy disciples turned pale with fright and stood up at the same time. In addition to shock, they were also full of anger. Tianji was even more stunned. He could not believe that Shan Yu had the ability to break through his advanced saint-level soul cultivation to investigate the situation here. Amazing, really amazing. Amazing, truly amazing. Mr. Ji Dong is indeed worthy of being called the Light and Darkness Saint King. Only now do I understand why you were able to cause such destruction to the Darkness Temple. This is clearly not something that can be done with your strength. Please wait a moment. Shan Yu will come over immediately. The sound came from all directions in the room. Shan Yu was obviously not here, but he was able to monitor everything here through a special method. Ji-dong looked at his companion's puzzled eyes and said, "There must be a reason why the Tianji Resistance Alliance can exist for so many years." Tianji, you don't have to be so surprised. Shan Yu does not have the ability to break through your soul blockade, but our voices can always be transmitted. We only need to make a few inconspicuous small tubes in this room and then connect them to a relatively far place. Through this method, we can hear the transmission of our voices. There is no need for any soul detection at all. I deliberately let him hear us. Otherwise, why didn't I use soul transmission to communicate with everyone? While Ji-dong was speaking, there was already a knock on the door. "Please come in, Mr. Shan Yu." Ji-dong smiled and said confidently. The door opened, and Shan Yu walked in. When he saw Ji-dong, his face was filled with shock and admiration, and his expression was much more natural than when he had first seen Ji-dong. Ji-dong pointed to the sofa at the side and said, "Please take a seat. I think we can talk openly this time." Shan Yu sat down on the sofa. He clearly felt a chill down his spine as he looked at the Radiance Gang holy disciples. It was obvious that the Radiance Gang holy disciples were extremely dissatisfied with him. If so many powerhouses attacked him at the same time, he did not think that he would have a chance of leaving this place alive. "Mr. Ji-dong, can you first clear my doubts? How did you know that I was eavesdropping on your conversation? This is almost impossible. Mo. Air doesn't know about the setup here, and Shan Lei wouldn't have told you that I have a treasure on me that can shield me from soul detection. I have been very careful just now, and you didn't use soul detection to follow me. How did you find out?" Ji-dong smiled mysteriously and said, "If I said that I guessed, would you believe me?" Shan Yu looked at him in a daze and said, "Guessed?" Ji-dong smiled. "Actually, I can't be sure whether you were eavesdropping or not. Just like you said, I didn't use soul detection to follow you, nor did I detect your presence. What I said just now was just to trick you to come out. Actually, I can't be sure that you were eavesdropping on our conversation. That works. Whether it was the Radiance Gang holy disciples or Shan Yu, the vice president of the Heavenly Secrets Organization, they all looked at Ji-dong with a strange expression. Ji-dong chuckled and said, "Why are all of you looking at me like that? I'm a human after all, not a god. How can I detect everything? But if I were Mr. Shan Yu, and our relationship is in such a delicate situation, I would definitely want to know what the other party is thinking. That's why I made such a guess." Of course, Ji-dong would never tell them that he was able to make such a conjecture because he had lived 2 lives. He had thought of the existence of listening devices and had come to this conclusion. He had never expected that he would actually succeed in tricking Shan Yu out. There was no need to mention Shan Yu's gloominess. Given his steady will, it was a great humiliation for him to be tricked by a young man in front of him. Actually, this was also because the abilities that the Radiance Gang holy disciples had displayed in the 2 battles at the Darkness Temple were too powerful, giving people a feeling that they were omnipotent. Moreover, Ji-dong's analysis just now was too shocking. Shan Yu's entire body turned cold as he eavesdropped on Ji-dong's words. He had never expected that the flaws that he had revealed in such a short conversation would be 90% consistent with the truth after Ji-dong analyzed them. Ji-dong had even said those words at the most crucial moment. Even if it was someone else, they would also have been tricked under such circumstances, unless no one was eavesdropping at all. Taking a deep breath, Shan Yu looked at Ji-dong with some pain and said, "I'm convinced. I'm really convinced this time. We really should have a good talk, but I still need to ask for everyone's forgiveness." Chapter 620. Ji-dong looked at Shan Yu and shook his head, saying, "Actually, there's nothing to forgive or forget between us. I just hope that you can show some sincerity. Although we belong to the light and darkness factions, at the moment, we all have the same goal. At least for now, we can still be allies. Don't you think so?" Shan Yu nodded his head, sighed, and said, "I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Looks like it was the right decision for me not to become the president of the Heavenly Secrets Organization. In terms of ability, I am indeed incomparable to you Heavenly STEM holy disciples." Duexner, who was beside him, could not help but ask, "Teacher, you've been talking for so long. Who is this president of the Tianji organization? Ji Dong smiled and said, before I met Deputy President Shan Yu today, I didn't even dare to imagine that this person would one day become our ally. If I'm not wrong, this person should be Li Yonghao. After Ji Dong's analysis, although most of the Saints of Light had vaguely guessed it, when the name Li Yonghao really came out of Ji Dong's mouth, everyone could not help but change their expressions. Who was Li Yonghao? The leader of the dark heavenly stem saints, the holy king of darkness, a peak expert, the strongest person in the five elements dark continent, second only to dark divination. He had the nickname of the ultimate weapon. Back then, he had fought with fury 3 times in the holy evil island. He was the absolute soul of the dark heavenly stem saints. Who would have thought that this most capable subordinate of dark divination would be the leader of the rebellion against the Divination Alliance? Shan Yu did not speak, but from his eyes, everyone could see that he had tacitly agreed with Ji Dong's words. For a moment, the Saints of Light Stem could not help but look at each other, feeling a sense of subversion in their hearts. Ji Dong said leisurely, if we attack Dark Tianji and cause both sides to suffer, then the one who benefits the most is undoubtedly the dark heavenly stem saint. They only need to seize the opportunity to kill the surviving side of both sides. Then it can be said that they have gotten rid of the internal and external troubles. With their position in the five elements continent, it will be no problem for them to replace Dark Tianji as the commander of the Dark Army. When they attack our five elements continent, who can stop the dark heavenly stem saint? After occupying the radiant five elements continent, we can then govern the other 2 continents. This way, we will be able to achieve twice the results. What a good plan. At this moment, Chen Sichuan finally understood everything. Looking at Ji Dong, she could not help but reveal a trace of gratification in her eyes. It was obvious that Ji Dong was not only growing in strength, but had also made great progress in other aspects. In fact, after obtaining the last 3 bottles of the 10 great wines, Ji Dong's heart was unprecedentedly relaxed. The stubbornness in his heart did not change, but he was more at ease. That was why he could calmly analyze the situation. Hasn't the Fector resistance already existed for hundreds of years? How old is Li Yonghao? How could he have become the president? Didn't they say that the dark heavenly stem saint was groomed by Dark Tianji? Jean asked in confusion. Ji Dong looked at Shan Yu and said, just now, Vice President Shan Yu has already made it very clear that he is the original president of the Fector resistance. As for Li Yonghao, he should have only been working with the Fector resistance for a short period of time. Moreover, Li Yonghao is different from Darkness Tianji. He is the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint King and is extremely dissatisfied with everything that Darkness Tianji has done. He is also unwilling to see our Darkness 5 elements, mainland, turn into such a state. If we had to choose a ruler, he would obviously be much more suitable than Darkness Tianji. Furthermore, if we were to develop our own organization and go against Darkness Tianji, it would be no different from hitting a rock with an egg. Even after a few hundred years, it would still be impossible. However, things will be different with him around. As the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint King, his status is second only to Darkness Tianji. As long as Darkness Tianji dies, he will naturally become the ruler of this mainland. At that time, I believe that he will definitely do his best to improve the situation of our Darkness 5 Elements mainland. Shan Yu nodded his head and said, Mr. Ji Dong is right. Our cooperation with Li Yonghao has only lasted for a few years. In reality, we have no choice but to cooperate with them. Just now, Mr. Ji Dong said that if Darkness Tianji really wanted to find us, it would be impossible for us to go against him. Furthermore, the Darkness Heavenly Stem Saint Disciple had received this mission and found me in a short period of time. It was also at that time that Li Yonghao proposed to cooperate with us. Ji Dong smiled indifferently and said, I also believe that Li Yonghao has the ability to do so. However, he definitely wants to build all of this on the basis of unifying our Radiance 5 Elements continent. With the enormous resources of the Radiance 5 Elements continent, he will be able to save a few decades of time and recover the Darkness 5 Elements continent as soon as possible. Am I right? Therefore, it is impossible for him to come forward and discuss cooperation with us. Regardless of whether he supports Dark Tianji or supports your resistance against the Fecta resistance, we will never be friends. We can only be enemies. The only thing we have in common is that we all want Dark Tianji dead. Without us, it is impossible for him to achieve this. Shan Yu sighed and said, "It seems that there is no way for us to cooperate. After all, there is a gap in ideology." Ji Dong said, "Vice President Shan Yu, please tell Li Yonghao to think about the actions of the first generation of saints of light and darkness. Perhaps he thinks that it is possible for us to cooperate now, but within a year, I will let him see the basis of cooperation and ask him to protect his holy evil island. However, there's one thing that you are right about. Now that Dark Tianji has to stay in the Darkness Temple, your organization can play its role at this time. If Dark Tianji really leaves the Darkness Temple, maybe we will really visit the Darkness Temple again. If I am not wrong, the power that Li Yonghao can't really control is the part of the Darkness Temple. Even if Dark Tianji dies, this part of the power will not listen to the command of the Dark Heavenly Stem Saints." Shan Yu did not answer Ji Dong's words. He just nodded and said, "I will pass on Mr. Ji Dong's words. However, it is impossible for the Dark Heavenly Stems Saints to admit their relationship with our organization. Mr. Ji Dong, you don't have to do these meaningless things." Ji Dong laughed and said, "Vice President Shan Yu, don't worry. My situation is not that small. Do I still need to sow discord between Dark Tianji and Li Yonghao? Li Yonghao should be very clear that if Dark Tianji really leads the army to attack the Five Elements continent, then when all of this is done, it will be time for the good bow to be hidden after all the birds have been killed, and the hound to be cooked after the cunning hare is killed. Goodbye." Shan Yu followed them out and sent the light heavenly stems saints to the courtyard outside. Ji Dong suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned to Shan Yu. "Vice President Shan Yu, if I said that Emoer should leave with us, would you agree?" Shan Yu froze for a moment and looked at Ji Dong with a somewhat complicated expression. The light heavenly stems saints were obviously a little surprised. After thinking for a moment, Shan Yu nodded firmly and said, "Okay, then I will have to trouble Mr. Ji Dong. Someone, bring Emoer here." After a while, Shan Yu and Emoer arrived in front of the light heavenly stems saints. Shan Yu looked at his granddaughter, and his gaze became a lot gentler. "Emoer, you can leave with Mr. Ji Dong and the others. You can also learn a lot by following Mr. Ji Dong. You have to listen to Mr. Ji Dong's instructions." Emoer obviously did not expect that her grandfather would allow her to leave with Ji Dong and the others. She could not help but be overjoyed. These days, she had experienced all kinds of thrills with the light heavenly stems saints. This had long made the little girl like this group of people from the bottom of her heart, especially Yun, who always had a refined smile on her face. "Grandfather, don't worry. I will definitely be very obedient and obedient." As she spoke, she had already skipped and ran between the light heavenly stems saints and the others. Shan Yu looked at Shan Yu doubtfully and said, "Father, this." Shan Yu ignored his son and said to Hyoheim, "Mr. Ji Dong, there are many things that Emoer does not know. I will leave everything to you." Ji Dong nodded slightly. Under his signal, the Heavenly Stem Saints had already joined forces to release the Five Elements teleportation array. A faint tin-colored light enveloped everyone's bodies. Under the shocked gazes of Shan Yu and his son, about a minute later, the tin-colored light instantly froze. With a flash of light, everyone had already disappeared from the sight of the father and son who had rebelled against Tianji. "Father, what exactly happened? How could you let them take Emoer away? Have you forgotten that we are enemies with them after all? She is your only granddaughter," Shan Yu said anxiously. Shan Yu sighed and said, "These light heavenly stems saints are really too powerful, especially that Ji Dong. He is even more terrifying than Li Yonghao. You and I have heard his words just now. When Ji Dong suggested taking Emoer away, he was giving us a chance." Saying this, he looked up at the sky and mumbled, "When the birds are gone, the fine bough is hidden. When the cunning rabbit is dead, the hound is cooked." These words are not only meant for Li Yonghao, but also for us. If Li Yonghao succeeds, the outcome of our rebellion against Tianji will not be good. Jidong and the others will definitely not harm Mo. Mo will only benefit from following them. He is willing to take Mo away because he has left us a way out. Shan Yu, come over. Shan Yu came before his father, and Shan Yu whispered something into his ear. Shan Yu's expression changed, and he slowly nodded his head. A multicolored light flashed. When the light heavenly stems, saints appeared from the light. They were already far away from the central city and had arrived at another place. Mo looked around curiously and said, This seems to be the outskirts of Tianfeng City. Jidong smiled and said, If the city we first met was called Tianfeng City, then it would be correct. Mo looked at him doubtfully and said, Big brother Jidong, how did we get here all of a sudden? This isn't an illusion, right? Jidong chuckled and said, Of course it isn't an illusion. This is a teleportation array. We came back to give Li Yonghao a gift. Mo pouted and said, Annoying, always saying things I don't understand. You guys chat, I'll take a look around. As she spoke, she immediately ran to a place far away. This young lady was extremely intelligent. It took them a full minute to teleport out, so the distance was naturally not close. The light heavenly stems saints had returned to the first city they had arrived at after entering the Five Elements continent. Of course, they had just found out the name of this city from Mo. Tianji said, Jidong, why did you bring Mo here? Are you going to use her as a hostage? Jidong looked at Tianji and smiled mysteriously, causing Tianji to feel somewhat embarrassed. He said, I don't mean anything else. It's just that Mo is just a young lady after all. Jidong smiled and said, Of course I know she's just a young lady. Don't worry, I won't make things difficult for you. I only brought her out to give Shan Yu and his son a signal. Shan Yu is a smart man. Since he agreed to let us bring Mo away, I believe he has already made his choice. Tianji blushed and changed the topic. Then what should we do next? I really didn't expect Li Yonghao to be the person behind a rebellion against Tianji. This way, our original plan has been ruined. Jidong shook his head and said with a smile, On the contrary, meeting Shan Yu this time can be considered a great thing for us. Our cooperation can still continue, but it will no longer be in the form of an agreement. Furthermore, we have a great advantage. That is, Li Yonghao won't dare to kill us. He won't even dare to let us be caught. Jin asked doubtfully, Just because we know he's the person behind the rebellion against Tianji? Without waiting for Jidong to speak, Chen Xishuan had already answered for him. Of course not. It's because he can't kill us. If we die, who will help him deal with Dark Tianji? It's impossible for the Dark Dry Saints to defeat Dark Tianji. They have to rely on our strength. We are also the only ones who have the chance to kill Dark Tianji. After all, Li Yonghao is a Dark Dry Saint. Even if he has the power to kill Dark Tianji, he won't dare to do it openly. Otherwise, their Dark Army will definitely rebel. Therefore, Li Yonghao can only place his hopes on us. He even hopes that we and Dark Tianji will both suffer heavy losses. Jin asked in confusion, But what's the point of this for us now? Jidong smiled and said, The point is that when we sneak into the Holy Evil Island to wreak havoc, even if Li Yonghao wants to invite Dark Tianji, he will inform us in advance and let us retreat quickly. Chapter 6:21. Jidong did not take the Heavenly Stem Saints directly to the Holy Evil Island. As the saying goes, sharpening one's axe won't delay the work of cutting firewood. Their ultimate goal was still the dark secrets of heaven. If they could not defeat the dark secrets of heaven, then no matter what they did, it would all be in vain. Therefore, with so many darkness crystal crowns on hand, Jidong was not in a hurry to take his companions to the Holy Evil Island. Instead, he stayed beside the teleportation array outside Tianfeng City and forcibly dug a cave on a hill to stay. With the pearl of thick earth and the staff of Earth Goddess, there was no need for Jidong to do anything. Amor, on the other hand, had become a coolie. She had originally lived in Wind City, and she was good at disguising herself and communicating with the Fect organization. Naturally, she was the best candidate to enter the city and help the Heavenly Stem Holy Apostles buy food and other necessities. Thankfully, there were things like storage devices in this world. Mo, who had to rely on transportation, would probably cry. More than 1,500 darkness crystal crown. On average, there were 9 people. Ji Dong himself took almost 300 of them. It couldn't be helped. Who asked him to have 2 attributes? He first absorbed the jade of heaven that he got from the dark secret forbidden room with the fire divine sword. Then, he began to absorb the crystal crown of 3rd fire and 4th fire. The different grades of these darkness crystal crowns naturally meant that the absorption speed was also different. Fortunately, all of the darkness crystal crowns were at least 4 crowns. If Ji Dong were to absorb a 4-crown darkness crystal crown, it would only take him a dozen or so minutes. A 5-crown darkness crystal crown would take twice the amount of time. As for a 6-crown darkness crystal crown, Ji Dong would need an hour to absorb it. A 7-crown would require 3 hours. As for an 8-crown darkness crystal crown, even he would need a full 8 hours to absorb one. Unfortunately, this time, they did not have 9 crowns of darkness crystal crowns to absorb. Ji Dong's 300 or so darkness crystal crowns had an average cultivation of 6 crowns. In a day, there were at least 20 and at most 30. It took him 11 days to absorb all 300 or so darkness crystal crowns. After absorbing the few pieces of jade of heaven, Ji Dong asked Heaven's secrets to show him the evolution progress of the fire divine sword. The results made him very happy. The fire divine sword's evolution progress had increased to 83%. It could be seen how much chaotic energy the 4 pieces of jade of heaven in the soul-searching formation had. Just these 4 pieces of jade of heaven had helped the fire divine sword improve by more than 15%. Absorbing the darkness crystal crowns made the fire divine sword's evolution speed much slower. After absorbing more than 300 3rd fire and 4th fire crystal crowns of various ranks, Ji Dong also felt that his magic power had improved a little. Although there was still a distance from level 89 compared to last time, it was obviously a lot better. On the other hand, the fire divine sword's evolution progress had only increased by 1%. The overall evolution had exceeded 84%, and it looked like it was only 16% away from completion. But in reality, where could Ji Dong find 4 more pieces of jade of heaven? He could only rely on continuous cultivation and absorbing darkness crystal crowns to improve it as much as possible. However, even so, Ji Dong was not discouraged at all. The fire divine sword that had not completed its evolution was already so powerful. If the fire divine sword completed its evolution, how powerful would it be? At that time, perhaps even Dark Heaven's secrets would be extremely afraid. As for his own level, Ji Dong had a vague premonition that although it was very difficult for him to reach 9 crowns at the moment, once his cultivation truly broke through to 9 crowns, it would definitely be a qualitative leap. No matter what, he was a yin-yang dual fire demon master, so he would more or less be different from everyone else. Although the number of crystal cores Ji Dong had absorbed was more than 300, almost twice as many as the others, he was still the first to finish absorbing. With his understanding of the profound meaning of primal chaos, the strength of the yin and yang attributes, and his saint-level physique that was not afraid of the huge impact of energy, the absorption was naturally half as fast. These days, it was not only in charge of buying things for everyone. She had even become a little cook. Every day, with the help of Heaven's secrets, she cooked for the heavenly dry saints. The heavenly dry saints did not know how long it had been since they had eaten a decent hot meal. With Mo taking care of them, everyone's impression of her continued to rise. The most delightful thing was that although Mo was not even 16 years old, her cooking skills were quite exquisite. Mo was a very sensible girl. She had lost her mother since she was a child, so from the age of 10, she learned how to cook from her uncles and aunts in the organization so that she could replace her mother and take care of her father. She was clever to begin with, and after a few years, she learned how to cook. This was a great advantage for the heavenly dry saints. Every day, they ate Mo's hot meals, and it was the flavor of the 5-element continent. Everyone couldn't help but like this little girl. When they ate Mo-ers cooking for the first time, they had been relying on dry rations for a long time, and they almost ate their own tongues. As the saying went, in order to keep a person's heart, one had to keep their stomach first. There was also a saying that went, you have to take advantage of others. Under Mo-er's powerful food offensive, the heavenly dry saints gave her many benefits. Among them, Ajin was the one who gave her the most. The reason was a little scary. Because Ajin had killed the most people, she had collected the most radiant crystal crowns, and there were no lack of high-grade ones. She gave Mo dozens of Fuhua series radiant crystal crowns, and with the help of the others, there were more than 100 Fuhua series radiant crystal crowns. However, with Mo's current cultivation, it would take her a few years to absorb all of these radiant crystal crowns. After all, her cultivation was too weak, and it wasn't easy for her to absorb so many high-grade radiant crystal crowns. However, if she could absorb all of these radiant crystal crowns, then her cultivation would rise to at least 5 radiant crystal crowns. It should be known that there were many 6, 7, and 8 radiant crystal crowns in the hands of the heavenly dry saints. Although the 5-element continent and the 5 elements continent both used gold coins, the models were different. However, this wasn't a problem for everyone. Mo used a 3-crown radiant crystal crown to exchange for a large sum of money. This was enough for the heavenly dry saints to use for many years. Moreover, this radiant crystal crown would be absorbed internally, so there wouldn't be any problems. In addition to giving Mo the radiant crystal crown, after Ji Dong finished absorbing his own radiant crystal crown, he took advantage of the time when his companions were still cultivating to give Mo with some simple guidance. Ji Dong was the first to finish absorbing the radiant crystal crown. It took him 11 days. After him was Ajin, who also had a saint-level body, who took 12 days. Du Ming, who was the last to finish, took 20 days. Therefore, Mo was able to learn from Ji Dong for 9 days. Ji Dong had an extreme dual fire element. Teaching Mo who was a little sorcerer, was definitely a waste of talent. His method of teaching was also very direct. He first used 3 days to use his own fire element magic to rush into Mo's body to help her widen her meridians and get rid of the impurities in her body. Back when Ji Dong was cultivating as a child, the most important part of this process was the blood of the snow dragon Feng Shuang and the vermilion bird phoenix blood. This allowed him to have the phoenix dance dragon snake transformation and a far stronger body than normal people. But now, Ji Dong didn't have these precious materials on him, but he still had his work to do. It was very simple, and he needed Tianji's cooperation. When he used it, Tianji would use his soul power to shock Mo's soul, making it so that couldn't feel the existence of her body. Then, Ji Dong would carry out his special support. Ji Dong only used his own fire element magic to help Mo. This way, there wouldn't be any conflicts. And he only used the ordinary Ding fire, not the Ding Si underworld spirit fire. Otherwise, Mo's body might not be able to withstand it and instantly corrode. After Ji Dong's Fuhua series magic entered Mo's body, he would find a meridian to attack. This wasn't a simple and careful attack, but a brutal one. When Ji Dong first attacked Mo's meridian, Tianji was so shocked that he almost lost control of his soul power. Just how powerful was Ji Dong's magic? Even if he used a bit of force, Mo's meridian wouldn't be able to withstand it. But this time, Ji Dong naturally had his own methods. First, he had already hung his core of life around Mo's neck. Even if there were any mistakes, with the core of life's protection, Mo wouldn't have any major problems. Second, after attacking, although all of the impurities in Mo's meridian channels had been eliminated and they had been greatly widened, they had also been destroyed by the brutal attack. At this time, primal chaos mysteries played a decisive role. What was primal chaos mysteries? Primal chaos mysteries lay in creation, under the nourishment of the primal chaos flames. Mo's damaged meridians would quickly heal. Just like that, Ji Dong repeatedly destroyed and then rebuilt Mo's meridians. It took him 2 days to help Mo open all of his meridians and rebuild them. On the third day, Jidong used half a bottle of precious 1,000-year life source to nourish Mo-er's body. He also used his own fire mana so that Mo-er could absorb it in one day. It could be said that even the strongest person in the world, Dark Secrets, couldn't do anything better than what Jidong had done. Although the entire process was thrilling, the effects were also terrifying. Of course, during these 3 days, Jidong also suffered a great deal of resentment from his companions. It wasn't just because Mo-er had been tortured to the point where blood would seep out of her body from time to time. It was also because the delicious food they had just gotten used to was gone. The male holy disciples didn't dare to say anything, but the female holy disciples, led by Chun Sichuan and Ajin, joined forces to strongly protest against Hyoheim. There's no point in you guys looking at me like this. I'm doing this for Mo-er's own good, right? Jidong looked helplessly at the beautiful women around him and said, I don't have too much time to teach Mo-er, so I can only use this kind of method. When she wakes up, you'll understand how effective it is. Meow Meow snorted and said, That's your problem. Our problem is that we've already been eating dry rations for 3 days. As our leader, the great holy King Tyrant Jidong, we need to solve the problem of our stomachs right now. You have to tell us clearly when Chef Mo-er can continue cooking for us. Jidong smiled and said, Don't worry, it'll be done today. Tianji, who was at the side, interrupted, Everyone, if you want to eat Mo-er's cooking, shouldn't you help her wash her body first? I've already found a good place. It's not far from here. There's a very clear river. At this time, Mo-er had just finished Jidong's hellish process of improving her body. Her entire body was covered in blood and dirt, and she looked like she was on the verge of death. The women looked at each other, and in the end, the authority to speak was handed over to Meow Meow. Meow Meow giggled and said, Tianji, out of all of us, Mo-er likes you the most. It's time for you to perform. So how can you retreat? Don't tell us that there's a difference between men and women. That day when we were cultivating, I accidentally saw her fall asleep in your arms. A real man doesn't need to explain. Hurry up and take your little beauty. Help her bathe, and then you'll be done. We won't help you. Tianji's face was as red as a ripe tomato. He looked at Hyoheim with a strong, pleading look. Jidong stretched and let out a long breath. He said, I'm really tired these past few days. I can't take it anymore. I need to rest. What are you guys doing? Exine, have you finished absorbing the darkness crystal crown? At this time, they had stayed here for 14 days. Ajin, Chun Sichuan, Meow Meow, and Lang Tianyi had all finished absorbing the darkness crystal crown. The others were still continuing. The 5 women dispersed, leaving behind a red-faced and embarrassed Tianji. Before Jidong closed his eyes and began cultivating, he said to Tianji, Oh, I forgot to tell you. Although her condition is very stable now, if she continues to let the filth invade her body, the toxins in the filth will be very bad for her skin. You have to hurry. Tianji was originally very hesitant, but after hearing what Jidong said, he didn't dare to delay any longer. Appearance and skin were more important to women than their lives. Moreover, after spending time with her, he had really fallen in love with Mo-er. He gritted his teeth, stomped his feet, and picked up Mo-er's delicate body. He turned around and headed towards the clear river he had found. Chapter 622. Seeing Tianji's hurried back, the radiant heavenly stem holy disciples, who had been cultivating, all opened their eyes and laughed. Back in Central City, when Jidong had decided to take Mo-er away, it wasn't just because he could get the secret support of the resistance against Tianji, but also because of Tianji. When Mo-er had been taken away by lightning, Jidong had clearly seen the deep disappointment in Tianji's eyes. Clearly, Tianji had already fallen in love with Mo-er. As a brother, Jidong would naturally help him if he could. Moreover, Mo was indeed a good girl. Tianji took nearly 2 hours to bring Mo-er back. By the time he returned, his face was dripping with blood. Mo-er's hair was still dripping with water, and she was wrapped in Tianji's clothes. Among the girls, Meow Meow, who was relatively petite, had given him a set of her own clothes. She chuckled and didn't say anything as she handed the clothes to Tianji. Meow meow, please help me, Tianji begged. Meow meow chuckled. As the saying goes, don't bother two people for the same thing. Since you've already seen it, it doesn't matter if you see it again. Why don't you wake the girl up? Why don't you let her know after you've seen it? Tianji would live a long life if he bickered with Meow Meow. He took the clothes, hugged Mo and fled again. What surprised everyone was that this time, Tianji and the others didn't return for a whole 2 hours. Meow Meow said thoughtfully to Hyoheim, Tianji, this guy, can't he have lost control and used the opportunity to do something to the girl? She's not even 16 yet. Jidong glared at her. Do you think Tianji is that kind of person? Based on my understanding of him, he must have woken Mo up after changing her clothes and told her everything. Meow Meow giggled. There's such an honest person? Jidong laughed and said, look at us brothers. Which one of us is dishonest? Meow Meow snorted. She looked at Jidong, then looked at Chun Sichuan, who was not far from her. She snorted coldly and said, I think you are very dishonest. Finally, Tianji returned with Mo. What shocked everyone was that Mo acted as if nothing had happened. She held onto Tianji's hand with a look of joy on her face. Tianji lowered his head, and the redness on his face faded. He occasionally glanced at Mo, and his eyes were filled with warmth. Meow Meow moved closer to Jidong and said in a low voice, looks like it really worked. Mo, and Tianji returned together. Seeing the gazes of the light radiant sect disciples, he said calmly, what are you looking at? Haven't you seen people in love before? If you keep looking, I won't cook for you. The lethality of this sentence was boundless. Everyone hurriedly withdrew their gazes. Mo, this strange little girl, wasn't as honest as Tianji, who was easy to bully. Mo bounced over to Jidong's side. Because she couldn't control her body that had just been greatly improved, she almost fell. She smiled and moved closer to Jidong, giggling, thank you, monster. Oh no, big brother Jidong, but you see, Yindu and I have already established our relationship, so it's not appropriate for me to call you teacher. So, even if we are master and disciple in reality, we are not master and disciple in name, okay? Jidong chuckled and said, Mo, do you understand what it means for you and Tianji to be together? Mo was stunned for a moment, then nodded obediently. I understand. From now on, I will always be together with you. In the future, I will return to the Radiant's 5 Elements continent with you. Jidong sighed and said, if everything goes according to our plan after the Holy War ends, then your father... said, I've already thought about it very clearly. I really can't bear to part with father, but I don't have to worry about father's future anymore. Father told me that Aunt Furong has already returned. After the two of you caused trouble in the Dark Temple, Grandfather ordered all the members who infiltrated the Dark Temple to return. With Aunt Furong taking care of father, I can rest assured. Jidong said in surprise, Furong is with your father? Mo nodded, a little sorrowfully said, it was father who strongly requested it. Aunt Furong sacrificed so much for the organization. As soon as she came back, father proposed to her. Aunt Furong originally didn't agree, but after father threatened her with death, she reluctantly agreed. A look of admiration appeared on Jidong's face. He said, I didn't misjudge your father. His situation is even greater than your grandfather's. Furong really should have made appropriate arrangements. But you don't have to worry. In the future, even if the Holy War ends, you and Tianji might still be able to return to the Radiant's 5 Elements continent. When that time comes, who knows what will happen? Cherish the present, cherish the people in front of you. Mo turned around and grabbed Tianji's hand, saying, of course, I will take good care of Yun. Tianji stole a glance at Jidong, but he was too embarrassed to say anything. Jidong shook his head helplessly, saying, Tianji, looking at you now, I'm afraid that in the future, Mo will be the one to control you. Mo, starting tomorrow, I'll teach you some of the main points of the Fuhua series, as well as some of the Fuhua series skills. But right now, you can't rest. If I don't eat your cooking, everyone will eat me up. Mo smiled. No problem. I'll go cook right now. I'll make a feast for all of you. It had been a long time since the holy disciples were as happy as they were today. This meal was especially enjoyable, and everyone even drank some wine. Tianji and Mo naturally became the target of everyone's ridicule. However, Amor was a clever and cunning girl. She was able to deal with whatever came her way and didn't seem to be at a disadvantage at all. Meanwhile, Tianji could only sit at the side and laugh foolishly. After Ji Dong's transformation, Mo-er's body had become much stronger, and her cultivation had broken through to the fourth crown. Ji Dong didn't let her continue absorbing the crystal crowns. She had plenty of time to do this. In these few days, Ji Dong taught her a lot of the Fuhui series knowledge. As for the skills, he only taught her two, the Dark Moon Claw and the Dark Moon Dance. Although she only had two skills with Mo-er's current cultivation, as long as she could use these two skills well, she would be able to protect herself against a demon master of the same level or even a level higher than her. After 20 days of cultivation, apart from Ji Dong, almost all the heavenly gone holy disciples had improved a lot. The benefits of absorbing over 100 mid to high-level darkness crystal crowns were obvious. All the heavenly gone holy disciples, apart from those who had reached level 89, had all increased by 1 level. Even Ajin's magic power had increased to level 92. Du Ming, Lan Bao'er, and Du Xian-er's magic power had jumped 2 levels, reaching level 83. Now, there were many who had reached level 89. It had been more than a month since they had entered the Five Elements continent. In this 1 month, the cultivation of the heavenly gone holy disciples had increased greatly. If this situation continued, when the Red Lotus heavenly fire was extinguished in a year and 5 months, it would be possible for all of them to break through to the 9th crown. Because of this, they couldn't meet with dark secrets ahead of time. After all, it was almost impossible for dark secrets to break through to the god level. And with every increase in level, the possibility of them fighting against dark secrets would increase. The day before everyone was about to leave this place where they had stayed for 20 days, Mo brought back news from Wind City. Right now, the entire Five Elements continent had begun to rebel against the Heavenly Secrets Organization. Hundreds of years of accumulation had erupted without reservation. However, there was no news from the heavenly gone holy disciples. Mo handed a brand new map of the continent to Ji Dong. She pointed to some places marked with red dots and said to Ji Dong, "Big brother Ji Dong, this is the latest map. These marked with red dots all have a small number of dark demon soldiers stationed, ranging from a few dozen to 100. These cities are either relatively prosperous, a place that supplies have to pass through, or places that produce food or military equipment. Other than magicians, there are also a certain number of troops stationed. Our current operations are to avoid these cities as much as possible. My father sent a message saying that if possible, please help us deal with some of these cities. This way, it will be more beneficial to our operations." Ji Dong nodded and said, "Tell your father that these places will become our targets. When you rebel against the Heavenly Secrets Organization, try to preserve your strength as much as possible. First, look for places without dark demon soldiers or places with a small number of dark demon soldiers stationed. We can only attack these cities after 3 months at the earliest." Mo giggled and said, "It's not us who rebel against the Heavenly Secrets Organization. It's them who rebel against the Heavenly Secrets Organization. I'm now a family member of the Heavenly Gone Holy Disciples." Ji Dong chuckled and said, "You changed your identity very quickly. However, it's not too late to change it after we've won a great victory. Go and send the message back now. Then we should also start to act." There was no doubt that after the heavenly gone holy disciples entered the Five Elements continent, their biggest target was not the Darkness Temple, the so-called root of the Dark Secrets Organization. After all, the power accumulated in the Darkness Temple was far from enough to pose a threat to the Five Elements continent. The real threat was the dark army that had already gathered on the Holy Evil Island. Tens of thousands of dark magicians and millions of troops were the real targets of the heavenly gone holy disciples. If they wanted to weaken the strength of the dark side in the holy war, they had to start from the Holy Evil Island. Darkness Tianji obviously understood this. Therefore, even if he returned to the Darkness Temple, he still left the dark heavenly saints on the holy evil island. Although Darkness Tianji was unwilling to admit it, he also knew that from the moment the dark heavenly saints sneaked into the Five Elements continent, a variable had appeared in the originally sure win situation. It was easy to destroy, but difficult to build. Although the dark heavenly saints were isolated and helpless when they entered the Five Elements continent alone, they did not have any worries. All they needed to do was to kill. Moreover, it was too difficult to catch them. After all, Darkness Tianji was not a god. He did not have the powerful divine sense to skin thousands of miles in an instant. The reason why Ji Dong did not help Dark Secrets influence the entire Five Elements continent at this time was very simple. He knew very well that the closer the Red Lotus heavenly fire was extinguished, the more attention Dark Secrets would pay to the Holy Evil Island. In the last few months, Dark Secrets would definitely stay on the Holy Evil Island, waiting for the arrival of the Holy War. At that time, it would be even more difficult to launch an attack on the Holy Evil Island. The reason why Ji Dong led the Holy Evil disciples to attack the Darkness Temple at the beginning was that he wanted to create a diversion and then target the real target. Now, it was time for them to take action against the real target. When night fell, Fiery Dragon took off quietly and headed for the Holy Evil Island. According to the news brought by M.O.R., after Dark Secrets returned to the Dark Temple, he mobilized the spies across the continent to search for the Holy Evil disciples. Of course, their search was fruitless. However, before the action started, the Holy Evil disciples must not give Dark Secrets any chance to find them. This time, they were not only going to the Holy Evil Island, but also to find a relatively secret place to set up a transmitting formation. In this way, they could teleport between the Holy Evil Island and the Dark Temple at any time. It would not be easy for Dark Secrets to catch them. Ji Dong let Fiery Dragon fly all the way to the fortress closest to the coast of the Holy Evil Island. When they first entered the Five Elements continent, they had passed by this fortress. At that time, for fear of being tracked by Dark Secrets, they did not observe much before leaving. Undoubtedly, apart from the reserves on the Holy Evil Island, this fortress, which was twice the size of Central Yuan City, was the real source of supplies for the Dark Army. M.O.R. had already told Ji Dong about the information obtained by the divination organization. Dark Divination had built 10 huge granaries and equipment warehouses for the Dark Army on the Holy Evil Island and this fortress. Among them, there were 4 such warehouses in this fortress. Each warehouse was guarded by more than 2,000 Dark Demon Army soldiers. The security was very tight. Chapter 6:23. Most of the 40,000 regular troops of the Dark Demon Army stationed on the Holy Evil Island were stationed around the 10 granaries. These reserves could be said to be the wealth of the people from the Dark Five Elements continent. Even if they couldn't continuously transport supplies from the Dark Five Elements continent, the 10 granaries alone could support the Dark Army for a full 3 years. It was conceivable how huge the 10 granaries were. Ji Dong, should we attack this fortress? The Dark Stem Saints are guarding the Holy Evil Island. Not to mention that they might not be able to get here in time. Even if they can, we can leave easily. Looking at the huge dark fortress in the distance, Yao, Qianshu, and Hyoheim said. They had just set up an omnidirectional teleportation formation in the forest in front of them and built a base for them to teleport at any time. Yao Qianshu wasn't the only one who had such an idea. The other Dark Stem Saints also agreed with Yao Qianshu. After all, not only could they easily deal a blow to the Dark Army, they could also mobilize the Dark Stem Saints. Moreover, when they attacked the Dark Fortress, they would definitely be able to kill a large number of Dark Demon Army and obtain another batch of Dark Crystal Crowns. After tasting the sweetness of absorbing Dark Crystal Crowns to increase mana, the Dark Stem Saints were very looking forward to hunting Dark Magicians again. Ji shook his head and said, "No, it's not a good time to attack this place. Don't worry, this place will be our target sooner or later. However, if we set our target on this fortress the first time we come here, what if Dark Tianji returns from the Darkness Temple to take charge of the Shengxi Island at the same time? If that's the case, although we won't be in any danger, the harvest will be limited. Li Yonghao won't take action knowing that we are not in danger. But it's different if we directly attack the holy evil island. He will hesitate to inform Dark Tianji to come here. Miao Miao said doubtfully, hasn't the teleportation formation of the Dark Temple been destroyed by us? How can Dark Tianji get here in time? Ji Dong said, if we are Dark Tianji, what should we do first after returning to the Dark Temple? He has to build the teleportation formation first. Only in this way can he take care of both the Darkness Temple and the Shengxi Island. Therefore, if we attack the Darkness Fortress now, we will gain limited benefits. Therefore, our first target is the Shengxi Island. As he spoke, Ji Dong took out a pile of magic wine made of jade of the land from his vermilion bird bracelet. He simply sorted them and pointed them out to his companions, saying, I have 21 bottles of magic wine with super killing skills. Tianji, you take 1 bottle to defend yourself. As for the remaining 20 bottles, each of you can take 2. Your soul cultivation is not enough to activate this skill. It's easy to hurt yourself, so you don't need to take it. After distributing the magic wine with primary super killing skills, Ji Dong put away the last 4 bottles and continued. The rest are the ultimate killing skills. In order to increase the killing range and to cover the rear, I made these magic wine with Fire Dragon Fire Evolution, and they are all Yang Fire. Everyone, after we enter the Holy Evil Island and find our target, we can deal with those dark magicians. Don't be stingy. Except for 1 bottle for each of us to defend ourselves, the rest will be used. Yao Qianshu said painfully, so many good things, but we used them all at once. Isn't it a bit too extravagant? Ji Dong smiled and said, I've heard this saying before. What's the most painful thing in a person's life? That is, when you die, you don't have to spend all your money. This is the first time we attack the Holy Evil Island, and it's also the most unexpected. Using these magic wine at this time will be the most effective. Moreover, we can better preserve our magic power and adapt to the situation. Since we have to use it sooner or later, why not use it when it's the most effective? Seeing that his companions were relieved, Ji Dong continued. On the Holy Evil Island, except for the dark magicians, if we encounter those soldiers, we don't have to worry about the previous agreement. You can kill them as much as you want. Of course, if you don't have to kill, you should try your best to reduce the attacks on those ordinary people. This time, our primary target is the dark magicians. Those provisions and military equipment can't run away. We will have plenty of opportunities in the future. After entering the Holy Evil Island, throw out the magic wine as soon as possible. Then, we will quickly meet up, kill people, collect the Dark Crystal Crown, and then quickly retreat. Do you understand? All the saints nodded. Then, Ji Dong and his companions got on the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and flew towards the Holy Evil Island. With the newly created teleportation formation, it would only take them 12 seconds to teleport to the Holy Evil Island. That way, they would be able to teleport back to the Holy Evil Island easily. Emoer excitedly pulled Tianji's hand. Although Ji Dong didn't allow her to participate in the battle, she still tried her best not to enter the vermilion bracelet before entering the Holy Evil Island. In this way, she wouldn't have to stay in the vermilion bracelet for a long time. The Holy Evolution Fire Dragon was like a bomber. Under the cover of darkness and thick fog, it flew over the side of the huge fortress, crossed the narrow strait, and directly entered the territory of the Holy Evil Island. Although there were millions of dark soldiers stationed on this side of the Holy Evil Island, the Holy Evil Island was so vast that the Dark Army couldn't cover the whole island. Ji Dong ordered the Holy Evolution Fire Dragon to find a remote place to land. Then he took out a top-secret map that Mo had given him through the organization. When Mo brought this map back from Tianfeng City to Ji Dong understood that Shan Yu and his father had completely understood what he meant. Li Yonghao would never allow them to give such a map to the Saints of Light sect, because this map recorded the detailed distribution of the Dark Army on the Holy Evil Island. For the Saints of Light sect, this was undoubtedly a priceless treasure. Ji Dong spread out the map and lit up his hand so that his companions could barely see the situation on the map. Then he pointed at the map and said, There are 6 large warehouses on the Holy Evil Island, all of which are close to the strait. Here's the distribution." As he spoke, Ji-dong tapped 6 times on the map, marking the locations of the 6 large warehouses. Then, he pointed at where they were and said, "We're here. This is our first time here, and it's also the most important time. This is the only time that their defense isn't too tense. After all, they definitely think that we're still near the Darkness Temple. It won't be long before Li Yonghao receives the news that we've attacked the Darkness Temple for the 2nd time. If the situation is good, we'll be able to deal a destructive blow to them." Everyone carefully looked at the map in Ji-dong's hand. Only then did they realize that Ji-dong didn't choose the location randomly. Right now, they were at the center of the 6 large warehouses. Although they were dozens of kilometers away from the 6 large warehouses, there was no doubt that Ji-dong chose the location of the sacred evolution fire dragon. Just when the saints noticed this, Ji-dong said something that shocked them. Ji-dong looked around, and his eyes finally fell on Mo. He actually bowed to Mo in front of his companions and said, "I'm sorry, I want to apologize to you first." Mo was stunned for a moment and said, "Apologize? Apologize for what?" "Big brother Ji-dong, are you all right?" Ji-dong smiled faintly and said, "I know you must be wondering why I'm saying this. I'm apologizing for testing you one last time. Perhaps you didn't feel it, but ever since we finished discussing our plan outside the Dark Fort, my soul force has been locked onto you. As long as you move, I will be the first to notice." Mo looked at Ji-dong in a daze and said angrily, "So you still don't trust me?" Tianji hurriedly grabbed Mo's hand and said, "Mo, don't be angry. Ji-dong is doing this for all of us. After all, we don't have a chance to fail, and your Heavenly Mystery Alliance is still working with Li Yonghao." After Ji-dong clearly said that he has seen through Li Yonghao's plan, "If your organization does anything to us, we will be very passive. Don't be angry, this is also the last test." Mo glared at Tianji and snorted. She raised her head and said to Hyoheim, "Put me in the vermilion bird bracelet. There's no need for me to see what's happening outside. You should be talking about the real plan now. I don't want to know." Seeing Mo's angry expression, the radiant heavenly gone holy disciples couldn't help but smile. The vermilion bird bracelet on Ji-dong's wrist flashed, but it didn't just put Mo inside. Instead, it put her and Tianji inside. Not only was the real plan very bold, it was also very dangerous. For the time being, Tianji didn't need to be involved. Letting him comfort Mo was undoubtedly the best choice. It would also save Mo from being lonely in the vermilion bird bracelet. "Ji-dong, can you tell us what the real plan is now?" Yao Qianshu asked anxiously. Even the radiant heavenly gone holy disciples didn't know what Ji-dong's real plan was. Previously, Ji-dong had only told them through their soul that the plan was fake. Ji-dong said apologetically, "I haven't told you what the real plan is because it's too important to us. If we could do it perfectly, then we don't even need to go to the Holy Evil Island. We just need to do our best to harass the 5 Elements continent." The radiant heavenly gone holy disciples were stunned. Although they were confident in themselves, they didn't believe that they could deal a heavy blow to the Holy Evil Island's millions of dark army and tens of thousands of dark demon army. What Ji-dong said was like a miracle. Seeing the incredulous expressions of his companions, Ji-dong smiled and said, "Everyone will know what my goal is soon. Sichuan, you and Qianshu are the absolute main force this time. Our danger is that everyone's mana will be gone after the plan is completed. We can only rely on Mao Dai and Wu Yangye to get us out of here." When everyone heard Ji-dong's words, they could not help but be shocked and looked at each other. Although they were now Dark Secret's opponents, when the 9 of them joined forces, the total amount of magic power was enough to reach a rather terrifying level. In a situation where the opponent did not have a 9-crown demon master, even killing thousands of dark demon soldiers would not be a problem. Others didn't understand what Ji-dong meant, but Chen Sichuan's eyes lit up. She looked at Ji-dong and said, "You mean 6 directions of creation?" Hearing the words 6 directions of creation, the radiant heavenly gone holy disciples finally came to their senses. It looked at Ji Dong as if he was a monster. This idea was too bold. Qin Sichuan's 6 directions of creation had scared Lin Qing, the great Cheng holy master of Lin family, whose mana suddenly increased to the standard of level 99 saint level. This skill could be said to be meaningless in a real battle, but no one had to admit that it was terrifying. If there's really no restriction and guidance, this skill could really grow to the level of the ultimate killing skill. Ji Dong smiled and looked at Chun Sichuan, saying, "You're only partly right. It should be the 6 directions of creation and the 5 elements cycle formation. When I was in the Dark Temple, I wanted to use this method, but the distribution of dark magicians in the Dark Temple was too dense. Especially inside the Dark Temple, almost all the dark magicians could come here in a short time, so it was impossible to give the 6 directions of creation a chance to grow. Moreover, there was the soul-searching formation at that time. With our ability, we couldn't hide the 6 directions of creation, so we had to give up in the end. But this time, it's different here. The Holy Evil Island is vast, and most of the Dark Demon Army is stationed around the 6 warehouses. I chose this place because it is located in the core of the 6 warehouses. It will take some time for them to find it and come here. The dark heavenly gone, holy disciples who can really destroy the 6 directions of creation are farther away. The reason why I didn't choose a place close to the heavenly fire of the Red Lotus is that the fire attribute of the heavenly fire of the Red Lotus can restrict the wood attribute, which is just right here. In the past few years, all kinds of plants on the Holy Evil Island have almost grown. It's time for us to make use of them. The radiant heavenly gone holy disciples looked at each other. Lang Tianyi, who rarely spoke, said in fear, "That's awesome." Chapter 6:24. Through Ji Dong's simple description, the saints already understood his intentions. This place was at least 25 kilometers away from the 6 warehouses where the Dark Demon Army was stationed, or even further. When Chun Sichuan used the 6 directions creation here, the Dark Demon Army would be able to sense it from 25 kilometers away. Although there might be Dark Demon soldiers patrolling nearby, those ordinary soldiers wouldn't be able to sense the massive Emu mana waves. Moreover, even if they rushed over, the saints wouldn't need to do anything. Their magical beasts would be enough to deal with them. It would take even longer for the saints led by Li Yonghao to discover the existence of the 6 directions creation. By the time they arrived, God knows how much the 6 directions creation would have grown. Moreover, once they discovered that there was a problem here, the Dark Demon Army would definitely rush over in large numbers. By then, the Dark Demon Army would gather together, and if the 6 directions creation could grow to a sufficiently terrifying level, it would definitely be a devastating blow to the Dark Demon Army. Lang Tianyi's "too awesome" had roused the radiant heavenly stem saints from their stupor. Meow Meow murmured, "This is not something that could be described with just the word awesome. It should be too vicious. Ji Dong, how about I give you the position of the leader of Demonic Alliance? When facing enemies, you are much more ruthless than me." Ji Dong smiled faintly and said, "If 10,000 people die and 100,000 people survive, then I will not be lenient. Furthermore, according to the Heavenly Secrets Resistance's thinking, we belong to the light, and everything here belongs to the darkness. Both of us are opposites, so there's no need for us to feel any psychological burden. However, I have to explain the danger we are about to face. Firstly, we will be in danger ourselves. If we want the creation 6 directions to have enough magic power in a short period of time, we must first let it devour our magic power. Although we have all 10 elements, we can use the 5 elements intergenerational cycle formation to continuously output wood element magic power. Before we leave, we must make it as powerful as possible. It would be best if the dark heavenly saints don't dare to touch it easily. That way, we will achieve our goal, but at the same time, we will be in a period of weakness. Secondly, whether the 6 directions intergenerational cycle formation can absorb magic power continuously. If there is an unstable factor during the process of injecting magic power into the 6 directions intergenerational cycle formation, then we will be the first to bear the brunt. Therefore, when using the 5 elements intergenerational cycle formation, everyone needs to be as calm as possible. No matter what happens in the outside world, before I tell everyone to stop, we must continue to output. Thirdly, it is time for us to leave the battlefield. Since the six directions intergenerational cycle formation can achieve such a powerful attack, we must leave as quickly as possible. When I was distributing the dark crystal crowns, I left a few for each element. I will give them to everyone later. When we start to leave, you must absorb the magic power in the dark crystal crowns to replenish yourselves. No matter how tired you are, you must accumulate enough magic power to activate the teleportation. Otherwise, with the flight of the sacred evolution fire dragon, it will be impossible for us to leave the range of the six directions intergenerational cycle formation in a short period of time. At that time, the ones in the worst condition will definitely be Si Xian and Qian Shu. As for the wood element, everyone should try their best to help them. It would be best if they can continue the 5 elements intergenerational cycle formation. Lastly, I want to emphasize that the magic wine I gave everyone is actually to help us cover our retreat. When the time comes, don't be reluctant to use it. It is a money tree, especially you. The Saints of Light looked at Ji Dong with eagerness in their eyes. Previously, on this holy evil island, Darkness Tianji used an unknown ability to trigger the infinite lightning calamity in the sky, causing a huge disaster. Not only did he almost annihilate the students of the Heavenly Deity Academy, he also took away the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers from the east sea coast of the 5 Elements continent. It was also because of the infinite lightning calamity that the flaming bar appeared in the human world. In order to save Ji Dong, he resolved the ultimate killing technique and used the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire. Without the ultimate killing technique triggered by Darkness Tianji, how could the flaming bar be hunted down by the realm of the gods? Now it was their turn. Although the ultimate killing technique they were going to launch was probably much more difficult than the infinite lightning calamity, was triggered by Darkness Tianji. After all, no one knew whether the 6 directions of creation could reach the level of the ultimate killing technique. However, this was a rare opportunity. At this moment, the Saints of Light finally understood why Ji Dong had always been unwilling to target the Dark Fortress, but insisted on coming here. Once the ultimate killing technique broke out on this holy evil island, the 5 Elements continent was blocked by the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire. Fire restrained wood. The power of the 6 directions of creation obviously could not break through the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire, and the dark army on the side of the Red Lotus Heavenly Fire would probably... Yao Qianshu smiled and said, "Unfortunately, even if we really succeeded, we wouldn't be able to get so many dark crystal crowns. If our ultimate killing technique covered half of the holy evil island, even if we could not defeat Darkness Tianji in the end, his so-called holy war would be meaningless. Ji Dong, you are not just a tyrant, you are the king of slaughter. If we succeed this time, millions of lives will be lost. Don't you have any psychological burden at all?" Ji Dong said indifferently. "Even if it is against the harmony of the world, it is my responsibility as the leader. It has nothing to do with you. You don't know anything. I'm the only one who knows the whole plan. Well, our time is limited. Let's start." He did not care about what it was. He only had one life. What he wanted to do now was to fulfill his responsibility and then go to his flaming bar. So what if he had to bear all the responsibility? Even if the divine world sent down divine punishment, it was just death. It was enough to exchange for the peace of the 2 continents. Qin Sixuan had been watching Ji Dong since he started talking about this plan. At this moment, her eyes suddenly narrowed, because she clearly saw a trace of indifference on Ji Dong's face. It was indifference towards life. Her heart suddenly tightened. This indifference was not towards the dark army that they were about to attack, but towards himself. Was he really going to break the promise of 10 years? "Sixuan, calm your mind," Ji Dong shouted in a deep voice. Qin Sixuan woke up from her chaotic state of mind and walked in front of Ji Dong. Her soul immediately fused with Ji Dong's, and she transmitted a message to Ji Dong immediately. "No matter what you're thinking now, I only want to ask you one thing. Do you still remember your promise to the flaming bar? You told me that when she died in the flaming bar, Her greatest wish was for you to use one of the 10 great famous wines to mourn her every time her death anniversary comes. Only one wine each time. I think she did not want to drink all the 10 great famous wines in one go. Now, only 3 years have passed. Hearing Chun Sixuan's words, Jidong's heart trembled slightly. He did not expect Chun Sixuan to be able to read his mind. He replied calmly, "This is not what you need to be concerned about now. You are the true core of everything that we have to do. No matter what you want to say to me, you have to wait until we have completed everything before you." Chun Sixuan nodded silently. Of course, she could not refuse Jidong's request at this time. At the same time, an idea suddenly flashed through her mind. A wonderful idea that she had never thought of suddenly appeared in her mind. That's right. Why didn't I think of doing this before? Chun Sixuan felt her heartbeat quicken. The way she looked at Jidong also changed slightly. If she could complete this plan, then everything would no longer be a problem. She and Jidong could still be together. At the thought of this, an excited smile instantly appeared on her face. Jidong, I only hope that you know that no matter what your final decision is, I will support you unconditionally. No matter what you want to do, I will be your staunchest supporter, even if it means death. However, I only have one request. I hope that when you make your final decision and execute it, let me be by your side, all right? This is my only small request. Jidong frowned slightly. He looked at Chun Sixuan and hesitated for a moment. In the end, he shook his head. He did not want Chun Sixuan to be around when he went to the flaming bar. It was not only because he did not want the flaming bar to see him involved with Chun Sixuan, but also because he felt that it was too unfair to Chun Sixuan. No matter how unwilling he was to admit it, Chun Sixuan's position in his heart was second only to the flaming bar. He did not want to see Chun Sixuan's sadness when he went to the flaming bar. He owed her too much. However, just as Jidong shook his head, something unexpected happened. Chun Sixuan, who had always been so gentle to him, had a drastic change in expression. She took a step back and widened the distance between her and Jidong. At the same time, she cut off the spiritual connection between them. With her hands on her hips, Hyoheim shouted angrily, "I love you so much. Will it kill you to love me? It's just a small request of mine. Are you not willing to agree to it?" Chun Sixuan's sudden outburst shocked all the holy disciples. They did not hear what Chun Sixuan said to Jidong through their spiritual connection. Jidong did not say anything and merely shook his head. However, Chun Sixuan suddenly erupted like a volcano. For a moment, the forest was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone's eyes widened. That day, when everyone teleported back from the Dark Temple, and Jidong could not catch up in time, Chun Sixuan had already exploded. However, compared to this time, she had been much gentler. They had never seen her roaring like a lion. Although she was still so perfect in this situation, the strong contrast with her previous gentleness made everyone feel at a loss for a moment. The layers of the eternal armor, which were like leaves, flipped up and covered Chun Sixuan's perfect body in the blink of an eye. She stood there and looked coldly at Jidong. She said, "I only want to be by your side when you make your decision. If you don't agree to this request, I will kill myself in front of you. You should know that with my cultivation, if I destroy my own soul, you won't be able to do anything." Yao Qianshu was the first to react and said hurriedly, "What are you doing, Sixuan? Let's talk this out." Ajin and Miao Miao also wanted to step forward from the sides. Chun Sixuan shouted coldly, "Everyone, don't come over. This is between me and him." Looking at Chun Sixuan's stubborn gaze, Jidong finally softened. He sighed and said, "If you want to follow me, then follow me. I promise you." Hearing Jidong's words, Chun Sixuan heaved a huge sigh of relief. She had finally thought of a brilliant idea. If Jidong had gone to find the flaming bar while she was not paying attention, she would really have nowhere to cry. Just a moment ago, Tuki Holy Maiden had been shouting coldly and angrily, but in the next moment, the frost on her face had thawed. Her gaze had clearly softened. She took a step forward and held onto Jidong's big hand. She said, "I'm sorry, I was too impulsive just now. It's just that I really don't want to suddenly not see you one day. Even if you really choose something, I still want to be able to clearly see your choice. Okay? Ji Dong nodded silently. The holy disciples of the light sect could not help but shake their heads helplessly when they saw the huge change in Chun Sichuan's emotions. They sympathized with Chun Sichuan from the bottom of their hearts. Even if Chun Sichuan had shouted a few words at Hyoheim, they could still bear it. In their eyes, Chun Sichuan was the absolute representation of a woman's perfection. She had been so good to Ji Dong, but Ji Dong had always refused to accept her. In private, the holy disciples could not help but feel anxious for Chun Sichuan. However, they could not say anything to Ji Dong. After all, this was Ji Dong's stubborn love for the flaming bar. They could not possibly persuade him to change his love for someone else. After receiving an affirmative answer, Chun Sichuan smiled in satisfaction and said excitedly, "What are we waiting for? Didn't we want to let the Dark Army have a taste of an extremely dangerous ultimate technique? Let's start now." As she spoke, she had already taken the initiative to stand behind Ji Dong. She placed one hand on Ji Dong's shoulder and acted as if she was going to use the 5-element cycle formation.